No, I think she just said she had one question. I never heard that either. Actually, she probably just has one that I'm so confusing. I make her like, wait a minute. Now I have more questions. Like, I don't know.
Good evening, everybody. I'll now call this special called meeting of the Fayette County Board of Education to order. Superintendent Liggins, would you please take roll?
I will. Amanda Ferguson.
Present.
Tyler Murphy.
Present.
Amy Green.
Present.
Monica Mundy.
Present.
Penny Christian.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Liggins. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us for tonight's Fayette County Board of Education Budget Workshop, both here in person and watching our broadcast online. As many of you know, in the state of Kentucky, local school boards are required to have 3 different versions of the budget each year. The first, which board members received and reviewed in January, is called the draft budget. It is exceptionally preliminary. If you had a nickel every time we heard the word preliminary in January, you would probably be able to retire at this point. It's very preliminary because we don't have a lot of information, and so there aren't very many details. Today's meeting, though, marks the beginning of our work on the tentative budget, which must be approved by the school board and submitted to the Kentucky Department of Education no later than May 30th in accordance with state law. As I've reiterated before, this is an initial step in what is a months-long budget process, and as a consequence, the budget workshop is not the place where we're going to make final decisions tonight. Rather, it's an opportunity for the board to have an organic discussion and conversation to then guide the staff in developing a proposed tentative budget document for the board's review and subsequent approval. And so tonight it'll be both a reflection, a looking back, and then a looking ahead to ground those conversations. So in that spirit, I will accept a motion to adopt the agendas for tonight's meeting, which just includes that discussion on the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Green. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Mundy. Questions on adoption of the agenda? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This time I'll turn the workshop over to Superintendent Liggins.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. I would also like to add my own welcome to everyone joining us online and here in person this evening. Our staff have been preparing for this budget workshop for months, beginning with our budget staff gathering input from members of our community, including parents, families, employees, principals, our equity council members, our district leaders, and school board members. They have also examined current spending in every single area and worked with our Department of Pupil Personnel to project student enrollment at each school and to provide principals with their initial staffing allowances in accordance with the board's staffing policy. Estimated increases in revenue and operating expenses has been considered, and collected budget requests from each department have also been done. Tonight's workshop is an opportunity for me and my administrative team to share key information, to provide some context, and to engage in meaningful dialogue about the budgeting process itself. As always, the sole authority to create and approve the budget rests with the board. And our role as administration is to present data-driven recommendations. We'll provide insights and provide support your decision-making with necessary financial and operational context. This is a collaborative process, and we're here to listen, to answer any questions that you may have, and to refine our approach based on your feedback. This evening you will hear 4 key themes that will guide my recommendations and that of my team, and this really builds upon the collaboration we've already established through our strategic plan that we are constantly our North Star in guiding us. The first of these key themes is maximizing district resources for student success. Every recommendation presented to you this evening as a board will be focused on allocating funds that to have the greatest possible impact on student achievement, staff support, and operational efficiency. Our goal, of course, is to provide you options that will allow for strategic investment, cost savings opportunities, and the effective use of available resources so that you as a board can make very well-informed decisions and that they also align with our district's educational mission. You will also hear the theme of full transparency and community engagement as clearly stated as an expectation from our chair and our vice chair when discussing the format of this meeting and this entire budgeting process. Transparency and accountability were certainly at the forefront of this process, and that includes clear, accessible, and comprehensive information on financial decisions, engaging our stakeholders in meaningful discussions, and fostering a culture of openness and where questions and concerns are addressed hopefully proactively when possible. Our goal this evening and throughout this process to ensure that all members of our community have an understanding of how funds are utilized to support student success, and the board's leadership in maintaining trust with our community is essential, as we understand, and it's something that we can address by proactively addressing questions and concerns and ensuring clarity of how resources are allocated. And I know that this expectation is shared by all members of this board, and we are very happy to oblige. The third theme is fiscal responsibility and long-term sustainability. You should hear things surrounding the simple fact that financial stewardship is a key priority throughout the budgeting process, and always. We recognize that resources are limited, and every recommendation from my team to you as a board will be based on aligning those expenditures with district priorities and ensuring long-term financial stability by us all focusing on financial efficiency and avoiding unnecessary costs and using data decision-driven approaches. We will present options to you this evening that will maintain fiscal responsibility while also continuing to meet the needs of our students and our staff. And finally, board leadership in the process. The board does play a critical role in shaping the district's financial future, and tonight is the first step we're doing to develop a budget that reflects your priorities as a board and your vision. And while my team and I will provide financial analysis, operational insights, and strategic recommendations, the final decision about this budget rests with you. And so to make sure that we can have the necessary information that we need in order to do our jobs this evening and to make informed choices to inform our later work in developing your priorities. We would appreciate an ongoing conversation, and this conversation, of course, will not only be this evening, but will continue into the coming weeks. And so I appreciate each of your dedication to this process and the thoughtful discussions that we will have this evening and as we continue and begin the tentative budget process. With that, Chair Murphy, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think you have covered it well, Dr. Liggins. Thank you. And one thing I will reiterate is the purpose of this is an organic conversation. It gives us a chance, as I mentioned earlier, to look back as well as looking ahead. Just as this is an initial conversation, it's also important to understand that invariably there will be questions sparked by something you hear tonight, or maybe something that you think of later. And Dr. Liggins remains available to us to answer those questions. And one of the things he and I have discussed, and this has worked successfully in prior budget conversations, is you may have a question that other board members have, or a question that another board member might not have thought of. So streamlining that dialogue through the superintendent allows him the chance to compile questions, identify the correct member of his team to answer those questions, and then prepare the responses to share with the entire board. We have an incredible team, many of whom are in front of us today. I'm sorry, it kind of feels like an inquisition. I hope none of you feel intimidated by this. All of these folks are incredible here. If we have questions, they're going to be able to answer them. Some of the questions we might have here tonight may require a little bit of additional research, and we want to give them grace and space for that and communicate through the superintendent with them so we can get those questions answered, because I know that they are always willing to support our work, and for that, we are very grateful as well. So with that, we can get this party started.
All righty, thank you. We're going to begin by really just going over our current fiscal year to set the ground. So if you want to begin with that, Dr. Barber.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay? Appreciate
Yes,
the
sir.
opportunity to be here this evening and look forward to the conversations ahead. First and foremost, just want to say that everything that we talk about this evening, we hope has an opportunity for questions. And we're going to begin, of course, with the 24-25 fiscal year in review, and specifically as it relates to the strategic priorities that you guys set forth, some of the successes that have happened, I'm going to speak to, along with just kind of as we get into some of the trends and challenges, as you'll see, that exist current year. But I would like to also state that the board's priorities have really not only developed over the last year, but have been in the making the last several years. And so you can see them come alive. For example, when you all instituted the disability insurance, investing in our people, highly effective, culturally responsive workforce, that cost alone was about $650 the first year and about $750,000 this year. And so that investment in our employees speaks highly about what we're trying to do to support our teachers, our staff. In addition to that, in supporting our highly effective and culturally responsive workforce, and just thinking about our teachers and staff, is the $250 initiative, where you all provided resources directly related to the classroom and supporting our teachers. And I think that was a really powerful initiative. The board asked us to reach out and find resources outside of general fund. We have not been as successful in getting those outside resources. We are still seeking additional funding to support that. But what I will tell you is you've given the charge to provide this resource, and it's been highly successful. In addition to that, I want to also speak about the parental leave. The parental leave we have over 100 and I believe 16 employees that have taken that on. That's pretty significant considering years past, and what I can assure you is that shows that our employees are taking advantage of that, and we're providing that opportunity in a way, and especially for some of our younger employees that maybe don't have as many sick days, even though they may have to go on FMLA. And so that was a really powerful investment that you made. Some other really important successes that need to be highlighted, just student achievement. The investments you've made at the local schools in supporting our kids, the continuation and support in just resources dedicated to the arts, the continuation and support in preschool. There's been a lot of different discussion happening, but in reality, those resources have continued, and we're seeing successes and gaps closing. So just a big kudos for that. Also, just outreach and engagement. Our communications, we're investing in a two-way communication process. Very proud that you all have made that a priority, because we know that we have to seek feedback from various stakeholders, various community members, various families, various parents, and not just the same voices or a minority voice that's loud. And so I think it's important that we get all voices, and you guys have done a tremendous job in doing that. In addition, just organizational health and effectiveness. We've created a culture to really maximize organizational effectiveness. Our team, under Dr. Ligon's leadership, is very focused on efficiency and effectiveness. He drives this incredible leadership strategy to get us to find data that supports the decisions that we make internally, but also bring to the board team. And we have evidence of that this evening, which I think you'll find, is quite perplexing when you first see it, but then also how do we continue to invest in understanding and maximizing our efficiency. That said, this is where the board stands. The focus has been on the strategic priorities. We know that you have invested in these priorities. We will continue to analyze them and the investments as you see this evening, and we want to continue to provide you with the data that you need to make those informed decisions. So with that said, if you turn to I think I can turn to the next slide here. You've seen some headlines lately. These are just a few. You see, there's a lot we're going to talk about this evening, and I understand this is coming from across not just all of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but throughout the United States. There are some legitimate concerns when it comes to birth rate. We'll talk a little bit about that this evening. There are some challenges associated with how inflation is impacting everything we do. There's also some discussion surrounding why, if we're funded by SEEK and it comes as a shortfall, how often can we expect this to happen? And what are we to do to predict and get ahead of it? And so this board, we hope we provide you with the appropriate information. And sometimes we don't know what's going to happen, but at least I will say this. Our contingency is meeting the demand of the moment, and we have fulfilled the promise that's listed in our policy, and we continue to maximize the amount of resources we're using for our kids and our families while also maintaining a healthy contingency. So that's an important part of understanding this as well. And finally, just to reiterate what Chair Murphy said, this is just our roadmap. He talked a little bit about, Mr. Murphy talked a little bit about like the draft budget that's so preliminary. It's kind of, we don't call it a carryover, but it's just like predicting, there's so many other factors that take place throughout the year in regards to the impact budget, from revenue decisions that take place, even as we predict revenue, things happen as we saw last year, slow revenue coming in on collection of taxes, things like that. However, what is for sure is that we have to lean towards the data that we get in this fiscal year and historical trends to make decisions that ride into next year, because our working budget is not officially presented to you all and passed by you all until September, and we're already in the school year. It's in a unique cycle, unlike any other in the state, across the Commonwealth, across the nation. Commonwealth of Kentucky is unique in that aspect. And so for those listening and for those here tonight and for those who are, paying attention, we're coming at this from an angle very timely. It's before even March hits. I know it's right here around the corner, but we're trying to hit that timeline so that we can make the best recommendations possible for you so that you can determine what really needs to happen. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jackson to talk a little bit about our revenues and actuals and expenditures.
Thank you, sir. Every month, they got up here, okay, cool. Every month I give you a presentation of where we stand monthly related to our financials, and this is again reiterating that, but with a little bit more detail. The revenue is trending at this point $6.5 million more than last year. As you can see, property tax revenue is $8.4 million higher. Occupational license tax is coming in very strong at $2.1 million, and motor vehicle is $1.2 million more. Expenses are trending $860,000 more than last year. Now, statistically, that is flat because there are several things that can happen, but when you consider the size of our budget being less than $1 million means we have controlled expenses related to last year. We're trying to compare them. Our cash flow It's trending $1 million less than last year at the same time, again, statistically, saying that where cash fund balance is going real good. And overall, all funds, as I present to you every month, I want to point out, if you take out the beginning balance and look at it, we are $29 million more this year than last year, which means that our revenue is coming in going forward. We have not faced what we faced last year with property taxes coming at the delayed method. It's still coming in strong. Hope that continues, so we make it accordingly. I'm watching that to that effect. With that being said, I will turn it over to Ms. Grimes.
Good evening, Board. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. I just need to use my outside voice, I'm sorry. So I'm going to give you all the highlight reel. The district is committed to using every dollar wisely to maximize its impact on student achievement, staff support, and operational efficiency. Strategic investments, cost-saving opportunities, and external funding sources will be leveraged to spend taxpayer dollars responsibly while advancing the educational mission of Fayette County Public Schools and its board. For budget growth, the district general fund has grown by $100 million since fiscal year 20 to where we are in fiscal year 25. The revenue increases average $8 to $10 million a year. As you heard from Mr. Jackson, our numbers are up. We're performing better this year than our estimated amounts, and this is driven by a 4% increase in revenue. The employer contribution rates for fiscal year 26, we got some good news. It's going to go down to 18.62%. We're estimating a savings of $750 to about $800,000, but those savings decrease with each 1% raise. For fiscal year 25, savings were projected to be $2.6 million with the rate decrease that we received, roughly around 3% decrease. So that was pretty significant for 25. And with each 1% raise, that would have reduced savings by $156,000. The district's facing rising maintenance and infrastructure costs as buildings and systems age. The funding sources within the building fund are restricted and must meet specific requirements to be utilized for projects. We work very closely with the operations team to ensure we are aware of long-range planning and their current critical needs while we're planning their budget for upcoming years. The student growth areas have had fluctuations across the Commonwealth, which affects state funding. I'm sure you all have heard in the news and a lot of the media that they produced articles stating that the state had to shift SEEK dollars around because there were growth areas in different parts of those populations. So when you're looking at a SEEK sheet on the input side, that shows all the different areas that affect the funding. So if there's growth in those areas, so they have to redistribute that funding across school districts. And as you all know, SEEK is very different for Fayette than it is for our partners next door. So it's important to note that as our assessments increase, our SEEK decreases, but that's not just the only factor. There are many moving parts and pieces which affects the SEEK formula, and we'll talk more about that shortly. We work very closely with the Director of People Personnel to understand areas of need and growth, along with projections for staffing to allocate that to schools. Student growth areas continue to fluctuate, but we partner with the DPP's office to monitor those changes. The new school openings, we're opening 2 in this fall, and it's important to reduce the current year and future year costs in order to support these additions to our support our instructional and operations areas for these programs, and the district as a whole to continue the historic investments in salary. For SEEK funding, did I go too far? Okay. SEEK funding for fiscal year 26 is projected to be between $92 million and $94 million with a per pupil rate of $45.86 per pupil. That's the base rate increase that we received this year, puts us at the per pupil rate of $45.86 for fiscal year 26. Transportation funding under the SEEK temporarily increased to 74% for fiscal year 25. As part of the biennial bill, this was only for 1 year. So Fayette's rate for fiscal year 25 is 73.58%, but this will go down. We've been advised by KDE that that will decrease. So we will get reimbursed for what our costs are around, I would estimate anywhere from 50 to 56%, and that continues to fluctuate. The more efficient the transportation is, the more funding that we get. The cost of fuel often kind of helps in some ways to create an issue for how SEEK is calculated for transportation reimbursement. So the higher the cost that our transportation office incurs, the lower our SEEK reimbursement is for that area. The increase in fiscal year '23, we saw a reimbursement rate of 68%. So that was also part of that biennial bill where we received it. So you will see probably in this legislation, in the next biennial bill, there could be some fluctuations in how they're funding SEEK transportation. They always fund it higher for 1 year, and then they usually level it off for the second year. If assessments grow more than 4% in one fiscal year, the district is eligible for additional funding. So as part of the SEEK formula, we could receive additional funding if our growth rates exceed 4%. Historically, the average assessment growth in the last 10 years has been 4.6% and 5.47% in the last 5 years with several spikes. We had 2 years where there was 8% in fiscal years 23 and 24. So there are discussions, just want to make the board aware, as I'm sure you've heard, that there's discussions at the state level regarding the current SEEK formula. There's some discussion about tossing in on behalf of reimbursements. We've been in contact with KDE. They're doing their assessments. They'll inform districts of what that effect is going to be if that legislation continues to move forward. Insurance and utility costs are unknown for fiscal year 26 at this point. This past year, it was around $6 million. Is what we estimated as part of our budget. Some years we do a little bit better in our insurance costs, some years not so much. And as you all know, there's a lot of things going on across the country that's affecting insurance rates, and we're subject to that as well, even though we're not a part of those things. So utilities continue to rise, and we partnered with our energy management group to do estimations for the Mary E. Britton Middle School, and they're estimating, and this is just for utilities alone, this does not include internet, this is water, sewer, and electrical at $180,000. The building is very efficient. We were surprised by that number because we expected it to be much higher given the size, but they're very optimistic with how efficient Myron's team built that building. So we're excited for those cost savings. And then the technical center estimates were based on where we are now with Southside and Eastside. So that's a little higher, but he said it could fluctuate, but right now he's estimating about $300,000. So the overall amount we're projecting for utilities next year is about 15 to 17 million. So we're still trying to level out that number with our estimates going through the tentative budget season. So the Budget and Finance Committee is an integral connection to stakeholders, ensuring there's engagement with students, staff, parents, and the community. I'm super excited to have 2 students part of our Budget and Finance Committee this season. It's always wonderful to hear from our boots on the ground and how our decisions and how things are, interwoven between what they experience every day in the classroom up to through the district level. Our goal is to ensure that all members of our school community understand how funds are being utilized to support student success. Work sessions with our departments are currently in progress, and we have a focus on our student achievement aspects along with the district strategic plan and portrait of the graduate to assess these needs. And feedback is currently being gathered from members of the Budget and Finance Committee. So as that becomes available, we'll be able to provide that to the board. So that way you have all of the information to make those decisions as you move to the tentative budget season. I'll talk a little bit about staffing trends. Salaries and benefits for a district range anywhere from 80 to 90% of the district's budget. Fayett's is currently 85%. Fayette County Board of Education made significant investments in teacher salary, raising the minimum to over $50,000, still maintaining its position as the highest paying district in the state. So kudos to our board, and which has significantly improved retention and recruitment. The innovative workforce solutions through our HR department has included grow your own programs. There's a lot of teacher shortages across the country. I think that's improving. And Fayette County set the bar in creating a grow your own program to be able to recruit within and support those who are already here. Salaries and benefits for next year are projected to be $593 million, roughly. A step increase, we looked at the averages for what our projections over the next 5 years. So we did a projection to see what salaries and benefits would be. And it's an average of $5.8 million. This is not a hard and fast number and will fluctuate depending on education and years of experience. So that's just an estimation over the course of the next 5 years. That does not include anything but a step increase. For each 1% increase in salary, the estimated cost for fiscal year 26 would be $4.5 million for all funds, 4.1 for general fund alone. The district average salary, as salaries have increased, the average salary has increased as well. So fiscal year 25, the district average is over $70,000, well above the state average of $56,000. The district average for 24 was around $66,000, whereas the increase for 26, the district average will be over $72,000. The district general fund administrative costs are expected to be around 1.67% or above or below, so right around 1.67%. Discretionary staffing is provided above the state formula in Fayette County, so additional supports are provided through that policy, and the estimated amount that the district provides is over $30 million. We ensure there's full transparency. We have a transparency dashboard where we publish budget numbers along with monthly financial reports, and throughout the budget development process, the district remains committed to transparency and accountability through these mechanisms. Information is provided through our Budget and Finance Committee so they can go back to their respective groups and be able to relay this information. And then we get feedback from those groups that help inform the budget, which helps inform the board of those various priorities and needs across the district. Fiscal discipline is key, so ensuring these expenditures align with the district priorities, ensuring that we have the right data to ensure long-term sustainability. So every dollar spent will be evaluated for its direct impact on student success and program effectiveness. So the work sessions were focusing on the student achievement aspects and what helps support those plans. The board holds the ultimate authority over the budget. While the administration provides analysis and recommendations, the board makes the final decisions to ensure this alignment with strategic goals and community needs. And I will hand it over to...
Well, can I ask a question? Sure. I mean, you mentioned the Budget and Finance Committee, and that's great that there's going to be student representation. I just wanted to ask about an email we received a couple of weeks ago from the, I guess, now former chair, who's a parent, who was chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, and expressed several concerns, and one was that she never got to see a full budget, a copy of the full budget. I did ask verbally and in writing for a full budget, but none was ever provided. If the committee only reviews the specifics of $30 million of an $800 million budget, cannot provide the insight needed to advise the board. The committee doesn't see departmental budgets, school budgets, cost centers, maintenance budgets, professional leave, or even large district costs without a firm understanding of how this money is spent, and is not feasible to advise any changes. I mean, do you know why that happened that way, and is it going to be different going forward?
Well, first I would say, and then you guys could chime in, the mass majority of the budget is already allocated to personnel and set cost, and so it's not really something to advise the board on, because we know those are costs that are going to continue and exist. And so the main purpose of that committee for the most part is to look at potential new revenues to see are there recommendations to do something with those. But you guys can add to that.
Well, I would think for true transparency that the chair of the budget committee could at least see the full budget.
Well, it's not a matter of transparency. It's I mean, anyone can see that thousands of pages of the full budget, but it's a matter of efficiency. And so,
well, there's a reason the chair emailed us and had many other concerns as well. So.
Yeah, well, we all get several emails. That doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying that wasn't valid, but I'm not saying either
Sounds like you are.
Well, no, exactly what I am saying is there are.
Beg to differ.
Amanda, if you allow me to finish.
Because you always allow me to finish.
What I'm saying is that the reason that we have not had anyone, we have not given a full-blown 1,000-page budget is because it's not efficient or efficient use of anyone's time that is going to do that. But anyone would like the full-blown budget. I mean, they're more than welcome to have it. I don't think most people would understand all the numbers.
Well, she said she repeatedly asked for it and didn't get it. And I mean, I guess I just share her concerns because I have repeatedly asked for information and not received it as well. So.
Well, I was never asked, but maybe you guys have something to contribute there.
Well, I was asked, and then you told me that if it was information that was not being provided to everyone, I had to file an open records request. I don't see how that's any transparency when you're asking a board member to file open records requests. And if anyone would like to see that email, I'd be glad to share it.
If the question is about the scope of work of committees, as this board knows, we have a committee guidelines that was adopted and approved by the board and incorporated in the appendix of the board. And the scope of the work at the Budget and Finance Committee is not to develop the budget. As Dr. Barber indicated, that's the responsibility of the board. The Budget and Finance Committee supports the board's oversight of the district's budgeting process, and it's a conduit between the various stakeholders, including the students that were mentioned. There are district administrators, school level administrators on the budget committee. There are parents and family representatives or staff representatives on the budget committee. So that is a conduit. Again, those members of the budget committee, they meet with members of the various stakeholder groups and then bring that input back, and then that informs the discussion. So the budget committee, it's an important element of the budget planning process. But again, the scope of work that this board has outlined in the board adopted committee guidelines is that it's part of the planning process for the budget. I'm not aware of any expectation that the budget committee is intended nor is charged with a line item development or review of the budget. I mean, if that's a different understanding,
she was asking for a full
then that, may I finish, please?
A copy of the full budget.
May I finish? So I'm just speaking to the scope of the work at the budget committee, which is defined by this Board of Education in an adopted document. So, Dr. Barber, if I'm incorrect about the scope of work of the budget committee, by all means correct me, but is that inaccurate?
That is accurate.
Well, perhaps expectations for the budget committee should be a little clearer, because this is a very bright, intelligent woman that was chair of the committee, and I don't think she's just clueless about what she expected her role to be.
I can understand that, and I think it was the first year that we had a chair that was a parent, and so one thing I will acknowledge is that, you know, we're continually growing and developing and improving, but one thing I will say is that there is a charge of the committee, and the charge is not to go line by line or to review the entire budget. And so it's really to break down specific things and to provide feedback to the board. So I'm not...
And she did provide feedback to the board.
Right.
Dr. Barber, how many members are on the
that's
budget?
That's the concern I'm expressing.
18, I think. I'm not exact.
18 members, yes.
18 plus.
And how many aren't affiliated inside the district?
I don't have the count in front of me, but I mean, it's
one,
mostly...
as far as I know.
And did we...
Can I say something, please?
Board Member Christian.
As a former PTA, district PTA president who's been on these committees, budget, audit, and all of these things, let me just say one thing. As we do this work, I'm sensing a few personal agendas. I know the person she's talking about. We received the same email that she did, and I think it's completely unrealistic. And I think it's also disingenuous to imply that this board or this district was hiding something that is completely public. So when she had that problem, she knew good and well that you don't need to get hundreds of pages of every SBDM budget of every school that you can't control and that you can't tell them what to do with. So if we're going to move forward with this and we're going to be truly transparent, since that's the word of the day, let's be honest in what we're getting into, please. And let's be honest about who is giving what information to whom.
Well, the chair said we were going to look back as well as look ahead, so.
What we're not going to do, Chair Ferguson, don't interrupt me.
I'm not the chair.
So what we're not, well, you know, that's kind of my point. So let me finish. Let me finish.
Just the chair can talk too.
Here's what's not going to happen.
Christian, finish your point. Then
Here's what's not going to happen. I will not be silenced. So you're going to let me finish. We know, everyone here in this room understands what transparency means. It's being weaponized and it's being used as an excuse. People are throwing accusations out that never happened. So we're going to have this conversation. Again, we will not be interrupted. No, ma'am.
This is my 13th year on this board. You don't know what I've experienced.
Oh my God, I don't. And I don't care right
Okay,
now.
y'all, come on. We've got students in the building, and we need to show them exactly how we should be
We
behaving
certainly
for a
do.
budget meeting,
We
and that goes for
certainly do.
everyone. So let's all take a deep breath. Let's all calm down, and let's
calm.
all start back. Chair Murphy, please.
No, we're not going to Chair Murphy first. I want to say what I have to say.
Board
And I
Member
need the
Christian.
students to understand that this is a transparent event. You can continue to get information from us. You can ask me any questions you want. There are students here from high school newspapers, and I welcome them to be here. But I also need them to understand that when you have to have a situation where everyone doesn't agree, you figure out a way to hash it out. But we don't take the opportunity to accuse when we know that the other facts are the case. I'm done.
Thank you, Board Member Christian. Do you have anything to add?
Board Chair Murphy, if I
Board
could.
Member Mundy.
Since we're talking about the board committee, there's a few things that I'd like to share about it. I know the board committee, the budget committee is chaired with sharing and getting those thoughts and opinions for planning the budget, but it's tough to do that when the majority of the people that are on the committee are ones that we have the opportunity to speak with or that we can liaison with through the superintendent. And so I applaud the committee. I gratefully respect everyone that takes their time to work on any committee that we have, and applaud their efforts on expanding that. But looking at who is on that committee, I do think that we can take a bit more effort and care in reaching to our community partners, our students, and making sure that we have people outside of the district who are our partners who come and present to us. I've seen so many through the years that help contribute to our school system, and making sure that we get their voices heard on that committee as well. And another thing that I will say about the email we got from that board chair about seeing a more expanded budget, one thing that I had on my list of things to ask for was being able to see a bit more of a breakdown of those larger pies that we see. And I fully understand that the majority of our budget goes and is already set for instruction. But there is benefit in really understanding how much goes to which school, or how much truly goes into those that are touching our students every day versus individuals who have more of an administrative role, and truly understanding what role that a lot of people play in the education of our students each day. And it takes time and it takes systems to make sure that those pieces happen, but I do think that there is value in not only us as board members seeing that piece, but also the community as a whole being able to see where their money is going on a smaller scale. And I don't mean line item by line item talking about copy paper, but at the very least, how much goes to each of our schools and our departments, and those individuals that are really working for our students.
If I can add, I think it's important to understand, a question was brought up about the Budget and Finance Committee process, what their charge was. Their charge is identified by the board. This is not the platform or the venue to air one person's grievance. As Dr. Barber shared, there are 18 members on that committee. There are 17 members that have not shared a concern about the process, including student members. They were engaged, they were involved, and they helped us develop the budget, bottom line, okay? Our conversation is about the district budget. We talk about the local control, right? That's a conversation we have with folks in Frankfurt and in Washington. What we've got to be very cautious of when we engage in these types of conversations is, do we practice what we preach? And as someone who works in a school building every day, if my Board of Education started asking about what I was spending in my classroom when those decisions are made with our site-based decision-making council, the teacher representatives that I elect, the parent representatives that our students' parents elect, and the principal with whom I work every day, that would certainly have a chilling effect on the work that I do each day. So we're here as a governing body of a district with 43,000 children and 70 schools, and we've got to understand our roles at the 30,000-foot level and trust the work that's being done on the ground in our schools in a democratic process with elected bodies representing the teachers and administrators in the school. Our purpose here is to discuss the district's budget. It is not our purview nor our lane, and we've talked about our lanes before, it is not our purview or our lane to wade into school by school situations. That is opening a Pandora's box that I don't know, any of us would know where it would end. That's not a precedent, certainly, that we want to start. So I'm not sure if that's what was intended or if that's what's being intended, but again, we got to think about what is our end goal here. Our goal is to develop a budget in a large district that maximizes student supports. We're looking at how we did that last year to help guide how we're going to do it this year, right? It's high level. We started this workshop by saying no decisions are going to be made tonight. This is a conversation, right? If there are concerns about priorities and how money is being spent, this is the place to have that conversation, but at that high level that is relevant to our work as a governing body and as elected officials who represent stakeholders, who bring those voices to the table. And as our governance manual says, elected officials who are mindful not just of the voices that we are hearing from, but of the voices that we aren't hearing from, the voices who aren't at the table. So that's what we mean by the holistic approach, and that's the direction that we need to keep focused on tonight. Otherwise, we're going to get into the weeds, and we could spend months and get nowhere. And so we've got to keep the conversation focused. I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Barber to finish this portion of the presentation.
I would still request that expectations for all members of the Budget and Finance Committee are clear.
Sure.
Dr. Barber.
So just also to that point, just want to reference that, a budget is a plan, and actuals tell the story about where we spend our money. To that point, every dollar we spend is on our budget dashboard, transparency dashboard that's listed. It may be lagging, a month behind, but it does have every single dollar we spend. So anybody in this community, anybody across the country can look on that dashboard and see where we spend our money. So I just want to make that clear in terms of transparency. So moving forward, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hill, who's going to talk about enrollment trends.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for what you do. I know you all get attacked a lot of times from community members and constituents, and it's not an easy job, so appreciate what you do, seriously. Tonight we're going to go over the enrollment trends, and so kind of in the perspective of what we're looking at, this is just to give you just a kind of a heartbeat of what's going on in the district. Understand the data is it's either going to be projection data, historical data, or current data that we'll be looking at, and just know that obviously as soon as I pull it today, it's changing tomorrow, or probably already have changed. So as far as current, so I just always like to make that up front. What we're looking at with the enrollment trends is kind of the health of the district. Are we growing? Are we not? It speaks a lot to where we're going, I think. And so just really want to look at some general themes of about 5 or 6, 7 things here. So we're going to look at current enrollment, look at the 3-year historical district trend, which we're going to look at the first 110 days because that was February 21st. So I like to compare this year, 110 days to last year to the year before, so you can kind of get a historical perspective. We'll look at the future resident projections, enrollment projections. That's from Davis. You've seen some of this probably, maybe even in the rezoning efforts, but we'll revisit that real quick and just kind of, I think it's some good data to absorb. We're going to look at Fayette County birth rates and residential development. What's the next buddy? residential development. And we're also going to look at some of the areas that are growing more aggressively in the district than others. And that's it. So, all right. So the first thing here. All right, right now what you're seeing on the screen is a current enrollment. It has, what you'll see is that we're at 41,070 children as of today. That's K through 12. Pre-K is, we're sitting right around 1,200 students. So that, and what you'll see below that is the by grade level and by area of school, elementary, middle, and high. Now this next screen will kind of put it together a little bit where we are historically. What you'll see currently, the one furthest to the right, which is a 24-25, we're currently up 42 students than we were at this time last year. Now, actually, what you'll see is prior to our winter break, we were aggressively growing. And then right around day 80 mark, and I'm just speaking of this year's data specifically, you'll see about a 200 and some odd student drop. So they're like enrollment, enrollment follows a lot of different other factors. Housing development, interest rates impact that. There could be some geopolitical things going on, and we all know what's been going on with some of our families and their concerns. And so we have found that some families have gone to homeschool or have left the school. So some of that could be reflected there as well. But if you look at the next screen, so you know we're on a slight growth pattern. Last year was pretty aggressive, and we were pretty aggressive up until winter break. The next screen is really what I wanted to, and this is going to be hard for you to see unless you could see it on your computer, I would think. But the far left column is the grade level. At top, you're going to see the year. So you'll kind of follow the years down. And this data was, what you're looking at now, was pulled on October 2023. That's because this was done by Davis, and they do an enrollment projection off of that. If you look at 2024, we're about dead on where our current enrollment is. So the projection is exactly, the resident projection is exactly what our current enrollment is, or give or take 10, 20 students. And I say that only because the reliability on Davis, this is why we rely on them. They're pretty doggone accurate. And so I think you can see in the very bottom, we're still anticipating growth. But you know, it's when it's going to come, and sometimes with interest rates and things like that, it might stall growth. And I think that's the period we're in right now. We're in a little bit of stall. But the next screen, well, actually, I want to skip to this residential growth. This is something to understand. We have 9,377 units that are to be built, and this is on the books with the planning and zoning. So it's showing continual growth, at least as far as development. Now that could stall, obviously, but what I think you'll see is our current data, our projection data, and residential development data shows that we're still anticipating growth. I do believe we're in a stall period at this point a little bit. Now, one of the factors that Dr. Barber had brought up was the birth rates, and this would tell you a little bit about what's happening locally, but also nationally and likely internationally. Birth rates are decreasing. And so what you'll find, if you look at our kindergarten cohort, every kindergarten cohort that comes in seems to be smaller than the previous year. There may be some variances. Any kind of growth there is probably due to residential growth, not necessarily because of people having children within Fayette County. So birth rates are decreasing. We still anticipate growth, but we're in a slight stall right now. I'm just trying to go for big overall themes.
Chair Murphy?
Yes.
On the birth
Homer Green.
rates, thank you.
Yep.
On the birth rates, have you compared Lexington to Kentucky? Are we kind of on par with the rest of the state as well, or is there a difference based?
Yeah, I have not compared that, but I will absolutely look into that. But my understanding from discussions with other DPPs and also the national data that birth rates are decreasing within the U.S. And so I think we're on par with the rest of the country. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. Okay, this next screen shows the areas of intense growth. Okay, so we have it up there where our new elementary is going. in the Leestown, off the Leestown corridor. And then the right side of the screen of that map, that's the Hamburg area, which is why we put the middle school there. And that's our anticipated growth areas there as well.
And if I can pause on this for a moment, because I know that we've gotten some inquiries about, the decision-making process for facilities, and that's a whole separate conversation, obviously, but I think what this demonstrates, it's important to note that these types of decisions are data-driven, right? We're making decisions based upon what the trends are showing us, what the data is showing us. And so it's no surprise that our two newest constructions happen to be in areas on this map that are areas with the highest growth.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, and that's the forethought of those before me or years ago. They knew where the growth was coming, and that's why Myron's team looked for land in those areas to put schools in. So, but yeah, thank you for that. And so that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. I know I went over that pretty quick, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer to them.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hill?
Chair Murphy, you have one.
Board Member Green.
Thank you. When you look at the projections, the growth projections, do you see anything about a shifting within the county? Like there's an area that used to be heavily populated, but now we're seeing that population is decreasing and it's shifting into another space.
I definitely see, yes, I definitely see. So, and we have a lot of other elements that are pulling on that. With VLA, we have 300 and some odd kids there, so obviously those kids came from somewhere within district. So all those programming things impact A1 school populations. I do notice there are definitely flatlining, some regressing schools, particularly, well, for example, and I think it's actually the forethought of what the previous rezoning back 10 years did. Some of it is starting to take effect now. Like Beaumont was up around 1,000 students, and right now we're at 800, which is good. That's a manageable middle school, and so. There's areas that have flatlined or slightly decreased, but that's just because they're aging out. But then there's other nuances, such in the Cassidy area. It had a declining population, but then it kind of reinvented itself, and I think younger families might have moved in there, and the population's kind of stabilized or increasing. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have we seen any impacts, or have we anticipated any concerns as it relates to threats of privatization or anything like that? That seems to be holding pretty steady. Like we're not losing very many to any non-public entity, right?
No, we're not. But I will tell you another thing that's impacted is this House Bill 563, which opened up the borders to the non-resident. And I did check that last year. We don't have the data scrubbed and clean. I checked with our KDE partners, but we had 300 and I think it's 83 students of Fayette County students going to surrounding districts. And so that's another impact that will impact your enrollment as well.
Is that a net, or did we have any come in to here, or is that's a net figure?
We have about 100, I think it was 165 I checked today with us. Most of those are teachers' kids,
okay.
Or our staff kids.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And our policy is a little bit more restrictive than others as well.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So overall, through this section, some of the things that we've talked about and you guys were able to see is where we're at currently with our fiscal year. Some of the challenges, obviously, that we are encountering in this current year is our personnel cost. Of course, we've had, with the new teacher salary raises, we were able to recruit many more seasoned teachers than we have in previous years, which of course made the cost for those go up quite significantly. Also, since the implementation of our strategic plan, we're seeing more retention of our staff based off of the efforts that we've received. So, for example, since the strategic plan has been implemented within the school year, we've seen previously it was 93% retention within the school year. It's gone up to 95% retention, which ideally that retention rate would be at 100%, simply because that's while students are still in the classroom actually receiving instruction and our full year is happening. But to increase that is quite beneficial and certainly worth the cost. In addition to that, we also have retention from year to year have increased from 85% at the beginning of the strategic plan to 87% now. And so, but those are the benefits of those implementations, but the costs themselves do cause some challenges to the budget and having to find out and figure out how to adjust formulas and staffing amounts in order to make that happen. Also, another big issue that we've run into in this current fiscal year, challenge, if you will, is legal fees. Legal fees have more than doubled, and that has to do with some potential legislation, Fayette County being a chosen district to pursue some of those legislative issues. We also just have an immense amount of additional work being added to our legal office, where our public information department lies. And to be quite honest, rhetoric about lack of transparency really makes that number exaggerated a little bit more, because you have people that assume that they're not getting the information they need, and so they request information, and of course we provide it, but it causes an immense amount of potential overtime, potential more working for staff that requires them to do other duties that they're assigned during other hours. And then also just inflation in general has really hit every portion of the organization, from something as classroom supplies, the amount that paper costs. And you can think that's limited until you see the scale on which we purchase these things. And those things add up here and there to where something that used to be maybe $500,000 goes up to $250,000 or a $750,000. And so, and those things just add up in various places within our budget in general. And not to mention maintenance is also another big one, where we're seeing the impacts of inflation. And so things are costing a lot more. And so that is, we have taken proactive measures. There's earlier in the year when we saw that the inflation was happening and it was impacting, and we saw that our legal fees were increasing significantly and the personnel costs had been higher, much higher than in previous years. And we took the opportunity at that point to really stop and take a quick look at our budget, not impacting campus budgets, but even looking at this level to see where can we identify some cost savings. And we were proactive in trying to make sure that we were on top of that. And so we've handled that for this year, but those are certainly things that you need to be aware of and cognizant of in your decision making as we continue to move forward and take your vision and guidance for where we're going for next year and how that will be impacted. Any questions, thoughts, discussions surrounding those items?
Any questions, board members?
Chair Murphy.
Board Member Green.
So moving forward on the legal fees, that you said they've more than doubled, do we anticipate that that trend to continue? Are you seeing, have you been advised in any capacity that there could be more coming to us? Or is that something that maybe would stay flat now that it's more than doubled?
There's really no true way of knowing how that will work. I can't think of anything that I'm aware of that is forthcoming, but I can say that today and tomorrow we get a notice. So no, but we do at least continue it at this level, which is double what it has been in previous years. And so moving forward, we should certainly, our recommendation is certainly to plan on it being at least at its current level of funding or costs.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All righty, thank you. We're going to move on to anticipation. expenditures for the fiscal year of '26. So that's where we'll get into a lot of dialogue.
Yes, before we go there, though, we want to talk a little bit about the safety tax and current year.
Thank you for that.
And so I'll turn it over to our very own Chief Schaefer.
Hey, good evening, Superintendent Liggins, Board. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for letting me be a voice here tonight and part of this process. In 2018, Fayette County Public Schools convened the first ever District Safety Advisory Council. This council was a multidisciplined team of school and community leaders. They examined our safety efforts, procedures, practices, as well as studied emerging threats towards our schools. We had the opportunity to listen to our community, to engage with our community. We also had the opportunity to hear from local, regional, and national leaders in school safety. But most importantly, we had the opportunity to listen and talk to our students about what makes them feel safe, when do they feel safe, and what recommendations they had to improve safety in our schools. The result of this effort was a comprehensive 10-point comprehensive safety investment plan. It started us on an unprecedented journey of improving our facilities, improving behavioral and mental health services, adding school resource officers, and other features of safety. But more importantly, it laid a foundation of our safety culture, of a see something, say something culture. And that was then and is now a priority of our district, or our school board, is to maximize our tax dollars in safety, but get the most value. And we've been on that path, and I'm thankful for that. So the first portion of the growth, adding school resource officers, as there were many components. Traditionally, we had 4 officers at every high school, but these officers would respond to calls across the district. So if there was a call at a middle school or an elementary school or program school, they would leave their high school and respond appropriately. But today, fortunately, we've got teams of 4 at every high school. And you can see some of the interactions in these pictures. I'd like to highlight just a couple. On the bottom, in the Henry Clay track uniforms, in the middle, that's Coach Gatewood, or Sergeant Gatewood. He was a track coach and assistant football coach at Henry Clay. Some of the unique encounters that he got to be the police officer and the coach. And what you don't see is not pictured, and I could go on forever, is Coach Serena Sandusky, who played basketball at Bryan Station High School, who had a successful academic and athletic career in college and came back, and we were able to send her to the police academy, and now she's a school resource officer at Bryan Station, but also the head varsity girls basketball coach, where her daytime supervisor, Sergeant Smith, is her assistant coach. So they're a team during the day and a team at night. So you can imagine the kind of interactions that they have with their students. And so these high school officers get to interact daily through the building, and then also as a coach, mentor, teacher, but also to serve and build positive relationships at night at extracurricular activities. Another improvement that we see is we have 1 police officer in every middle school. I was a middle school officer for a couple of years, and I can say my experience was that this can be some of the most challenging years academically, socially, as you get through middle school, and also an opportunity sometimes where the community violence or community crime can be appealing, and these middle schoolers can be vulnerable to things outside of school, making those school resource officers that much more valuable. So here are some of them in action. Just quickly highlight the one on the right, Officer Kane. Andy Kane actually funded some purchases for this family and got to take them on a shopping trip, and that relationship will forever be there. It's really a great story. Moving to elementary schools, we had no elementary school officers in 2018. In fact, many people questioned why we would do this or what purpose would they serve. Was there a need? Even some of our principals, and I spoke to one just yesterday that said, I questioned the need for a school resource officer at my school, but now you better not try to move him because he is needed, and I will come down there and find you. So one highlight here is in the yellow, that is Ron Arnold, Officer Arnold. He is the school resource officer at Mill Creek Elementary. He recently had named by City Council in Lexington Ron Arnold Day because of his efforts at Mill Creek and the things that he does for them. And he's clearly there. He's the coach of the basketball team. And the bottom left, Officer Spurlock has began and helped a team teach great gang resistance education and training. And while the name says gang, it's mostly conflict resolution and anger management classes. And we trained over 500 elementary kids this past year. Another improvement with the District Safety Advisory Council and the 10-point plan, we've made great strides in student support. We've had the opportunity in the process and since, and the board has supported community engagement, conversations with our community. And hands down, the thing that we heard the most is that we need mental and behavioral health and support services for our students. And so we've lowered our ratios to 250 to 1, and in many cases we've exceeded the 251 mental health professionals to students. We've provided the DESA, or the screener, and curriculum. We've got a very detailed and important Navigate 360. It's the threat assessment module that schools follow when they do a threat assessment for a situation or event or a person on their campuses. And then, of course, we've had the opportunity to provide continuing education for our professionals, because we have added over 80 district mental health professionals in our district to meet the needs and to accommodate what we've heard from our community. And so we're very thankful for that. In terms of facilities and items and equipment and stuff, we've made great strides there too. Every exterior door in Fayette County Public Schools has an alarm, an audible alarm. Every school now has a secure vestibule, so you have redundancy in entry. You've got 2 validation points, so the person that's coming to the school to visit will state their name and their purpose, and then they'll do that again, and they'll be validated twice before being allowed into the main part of the school. In 2018, we had schools, as Steve mentioned, Beaumont was over 1,000 plus students at that time and had no cameras. We've added cameras, of course, to that school, every other school, and also increased cameras in every school, plus the technology. We've gotten better cameras with better resolution, hold longer, the footage is held longer, it's easier to access, and it's just user-friendly when needed. We've also upgraded emergency communication systems, so we have the ability to communicate quickly and accurately to our staff and students and anybody in our buildings about a situation that they need to take action and what action needs to be taken. We're very thankful for that, and thankful to this board who has been proactive to start that process prior to some more recent events and that you've seen across the country where they're calling for this. Fayette County was ahead of that and continues to move in that direction to have communication systems that exceed anything that we have around us or in this state. So here we are. We've got, by all accounts, great momentum, and thankful for that we're not starting from scratch. We've got momentum, and the board has sustained that, and the board has prioritized our momentum and safety. And here's the things that we're going to have to fund and consider as we move forward, is keeping that ratio of 250 to 1. The screener, the Navigate 360, is security systems and all the technology aspects that we see. Right now we're over 6,000 school cameras. They are, like I said, accessible to the schools, but also accessible to our FCPS police dispatch, to our dispatchers 24/7. So if there's an event around the clock, they can access those cameras and alert first responders. If it's nighttime and our school police aren't here, they can alert the city or whoever needs to respond. And then the visitor management system, or the Raptor system, that you see when you enter our schools. But there's still more needed. I, for one, will never be completely satisfied with our safety. I'm very impressed with the support we've had, and I'm excited about what we have done, but I know there's still things that are yet to be done. State statute requires now digital mapping of every school campus. As you can imagine, that can be a lot when you consider the number of buildings we have. State statute also says we should have a school resource officer on every school. And while we are close and we've made tremendous strides, we are still 5 positions short, that we've not been authorized. So those 5 positions will need to be considered moving forward with any budget consideration. Lightspeed Chromebook monitoring system. So our Chromebooks, as you know, have been very helpful. They're used throughout the district, and at night especially, we see that if a student searches for things of self-harm or harm to others, it alerts us, and then we can get first responders to the house that night to do a welfare check. Chief Newbern and her team actually have second shift social workers who monitor this and then send the resources. We have a second shift police officer that also responds to these houses if indeed there is an alert. Lastly, there's very technical cellular bidirectional amplifier, or it's really a repeater for our radio systems. As we've seen, we pay the city of Lexington, to use their towers for communication for our police radios. However, as they make changes or there's other changes around the community, sometimes our police or our radio networks are failing. And certainly not widespread, but there are some specific schools that we have coverage issues, and so we'll need to sustain a BDA or an amplifier for that police radio signal. That is our journey in safety in a nutshell. I encourage you to ask any questions that you may have.
Any questions, board members?
Yes, sir.
Board member Christian.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. Chief, I'm thinking about, you said there's 6,000 cameras
Correct.
across the district? It's not just about purchasing those cameras, right? It's about maintenance.
That's
So
a great point.
if we looked at what it costs for upkeep, for replacing those, would you have that, or would that be maybe Carl Hayden?
I think that's a great point, because it's technology driven, obviously, right? So I said that we've added cameras, but we've improved the cameras, and today's high speed, top-notch camera will probably be the bottom of the barrel in a year 5, 10.
Right.
And we know that. So Myron and his team have done a really good job of life cycle management, of monitoring that and realizing as cameras start to age, they've got a cycle, and there's budgeting or thought to replace before it's completely out of commission or broken.
Right. Yeah, and that's just something I think we have to consider. We know about utilities and everything that we always have to think about. When it comes to technology, when we get it, we're already on a clock.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So how far ahead do we really need to look in terms of the budget to make sure that that's covered? So thank you.
I think you bring up a good point, too, that because I said at the beginning, emerging threats, there are emerging threats across our nation, and they do affect our schools. And so therefore, there are a lot of companies in the business of providing different technologies. But, we're here to sift through those and see what fits our needs and then manage that with the cost.
Board member Green.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. In the same line, talking about the cost of technology, the storage of data, right? That's a cost that a lot of times is hidden, that we don't discuss, but it can be substantial. And so is that part of the budget process for the safety tax, or is that taken over in another space in our department? Because we want to keep the data available, but that costs money, and that storage and having that capacity. So I just didn't know if that is in the lane of the safety tax or somewhere else, and if that's another consideration for your still more needs. That's
a great point as well.
Chief, I can interject with that too. Yes. Just there's a team meeting. It's with I know Raymond Ross, Carl Hayden, and several others are coming together and analyzing like the cybersecurity approach and how we're doing as a district, while also looking how we maintain and store our data, because it is of concern. And so the safety tax could be a possibility, but we also want to share, kind of the numbers where we're at and how we're spending those dollars and if what priorities shift.
Thank you. Anything else?
Chair Murphy.
Board member Green.
This is just a comment, and I think this is a moment that talking about the safety tax and starting in 2018, where our community really were the ones that came forward and said this is a priority for our education of our young people. And when you go through the list of all the improvements that have been made and how we are the national and state leader in so many spaces, I really want to turn around and applaud Lexington and Fayette County, all of the stakeholders, everybody that came to the table, the students, the families that were willing to step into that space and share their concerns and willing to help fund, you know, improving this space. So I think it's appropriate when to recognize the community in this involvement, and I look forward to continue to work with them to continue to be the best in this aspect.
That's good.
And to that note too, thank you, Board Member Green. To that note too, it's a reflection that, you know, in that instance, the community stepped up, and it's a situation where, yes, in some ways we went out hat in hand, but we used that those resources with intentionality. We responded to feedback. We gathered stakeholder input. You mentioned the DSAC, and that's not just informing expenditures on safety tax as well. It's also informing other aspects. The design of the new middle school, right, was informed by that input from the District Safety Advisory Council. Some of our approaches to curriculum and the work that we're doing with family engagement, right, that's informed by those conversations because, again, this work isn't done in isolation, right? It takes a community, and one of the great benefits we have of the work that your team is doing is the robust and, I think, healthy partnership that we have with the Lexington Police Department, which is helpful, with the juvenile justice system, everyone in between, right? I've heard from folks all over the community who recognizes that these investments matter, and they're certainly not a one-and-done thing, and that we're responding and acting with intentionality. But that is a microcosm, I feel, of what this whole budget represents, right? Of this whole process we're going through. It's a response to that engagement. There's intentionality behind all of this. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. One thing bringing that back to the 24-25 budget is, and Rodney, I'll let you describe this a little bit more, among other things. One of the challenges that we're facing that we'd like you to consider and have a discussion around, the larger discussion when it comes to the budget moving forward, is with some of these upgrades, with some of these personnel, some of these improvements, that is bleeding over into, I mean, the safety tax nickel creates a large coverage of funds, but it also impacts quite a bit that bleeds over into the general budget that you'll need to consider as well. Is that something we continue to do? Are there, and how do we align those with all the other priorities as well? But Rodney, could you get into a few other challenges that we're experiencing?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Liggins. As you recall, monthly, I gave you also a report in detail that you get inside of the board agenda related to safety tax, and it's summarized into 5 categories: instruction, mental health, nurses, tax collection, risk management, and security. We received $18.6 million this year, and that's what the budget is related to that. We spent 9.4, and we have about 9.2 left to go. We're 51% related to those areas what we spend. Also related to, we thank the board for the 4% related to that, because that's what funds that. So increases in costs related to staff, increase in costs related to other things related to the safety, the 4%, as it goes up, it impacts that going up also. Other challenges that we face related to inflation that we're starting to see, as we've talked a little bit about, is insurance. Just an example of what we paid out. In 2023, we paid $2.7 million. In 2024, we paid $3.4. This year to date, and we still have months to go, it's $4.3 million. You've witnessed the cost also related to construction and other areas related to the cost. And more recently, our office was contacted by a few of our vendors related to being a partner of ours and talking about the impact they're facing related to tariffs and what that can do to our costs that we have to pay with inflation going up. So, and related to insurance, the reason it's happening, if you're wondering, with all the tornadoes that have happened in Kentucky, the floods in Kentucky, and even the fires that are happening in the western part of the nation, that affects the cost of insurance across the nation. We've had insurance companies drop us that we had to pay higher rates to get back onto the insurance and so forth. So this is an ever-evolving landscape that we're facing every day.
And we ourselves, we had a couple of fires too at schools that impacted it.
In addition to some of those challenges, as you know, I mentioned earlier some of the slides that you looked at. We have some federal grants that support our school district, around $40 million per year. Now, we know that when ESSER hit, there was a lot more, and we were one of the model districts to kind of be able to handle that and move away from it, even though the ESSER cliff can impact every single district across the country. Given that, this is a very high-level overview, but simply put, with the uncertainty in hand, what happens is when we receive those $40 million worth of grants, it supports additional supports surrounding our schools, what happens in our entire district, so that we can function focused on those strategic priorities. What also happens is we take in indirect costs. Those indirect costs help our general fund. When we lose those indirect costs, along with certain other pieces surrounding federal grants, it impacts our entire district, how we move with staffing. So something to consider is as we face uncertainties, which we know are coming down the pike, we have to be able to be agile and build in some supports within our budget. That's something to consider. In addition to that, you know there still continues to be unfunded mandates. So simply put, this is statewide and federal-wide, but there are things we have to do in our schools. And we're fortunate because we do have a safety tax. We do have several things that this community has really doubled down on. But we have things that happen in our classrooms every day that we have to support that are required by state law and federal laws that require additional funding. And as costs go up, support for that and we can break down specifics for you. But the overview is that we have to consider all those factors. And so we want you to consider those things as you build your budget. So with that said, I'll turn it over back to Dr. Liggins to talk a little bit more about the 25-26 fiscal outlook and what we're anticipating in terms of additional expenditures.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll begin by talking a little bit about, as we know, and we'll give figures a little bit later, but we're opening up 2 new facilities next year. And with that comes additional cost, comes additional needs, et cetera. Particularly, although we know the Hill is combining 2 campuses, so the cost impact increase is a little less significant because we're closing down 2 and opening another one. But when we look at the amount of services that will be provided there versus in the current 2, that will be a cost increase not only for square footage and the amount of square footage in the building itself that will require heating, lighting, custodial service, et cetera, but also the transportation costs associated with bringing in more students back and forth from their home campuses in order to make sure that they can take advantage of that. In addition to that, of course, we have the lowering of the reimbursement for transportation. And so those are things that I would just like for you to consider in this coming budget.
Dr. Liggins, would you like me to give some exact figures?
Sure.
Yeah. So some annual overhead cost estimates for insurance just for the Hill would be $30,348. Mary Britton would be around $40,838. So that's a total about $71,187. Utilities is about $297. We'll get you all these figures. $297,761 at the Hill, about $179,000 at the Mary Britton. Ground maintenance is anywhere from, this is a guesstimate, $5,687 for each. Transportation is about, and this is a guesstimate, $56,000 for the Hill, which I can imagine could be much more, and $871,000 for Mary Britton, which is quite expensive. And then we get into total annual cost differences. It's about $1.48 million, and that's just the annual overhead cost estimates. That does not include equipment costs, storage costs, total one-time costs, equipment costs like mowers, weed eaters, backpack blowers, pole saws, salt spreaders, snow blowers, shovels, 5-gallon gas cans. I know I'm getting into some things, but I just want to make sure you know we're looking at it.
Yeah, well, and this is important, and I don't mean to cut you off, but again, when I hear a lot of talk about people say, well, you have an X dollar budget, those things that you just listed, right, as my grandfather would say, they nickel and dime you, right? When you have a district this size, those are the things that we have to account for. So go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, so and I can go into greater detail, but I think the big thing is that those are just overhead costs. Then you have the additional staffing costs that you have to include, like a principal above and beyond, a secretary, your bookkeepers. That's above and beyond just the regular staffing. And so I think you can see those costs add up and add to what we're paying each year in our expenditures.
And it certainly impacts the budget overall, and something we want you all to discuss. And it's something that, of course, as we've seen from Steve, although that population in that area is growing, it's not necessarily giving us more kids in the district that's increasing our SEEK allocation. It's simply shifting. And so adding a 13th school adds all of these expenses, but doesn't necessarily take away any expenses from elsewhere. And so those are just things to consider as we're doing this. Also, the rising cost of insurance. We've been seeing about $1 million increase every year again, and stated earlier that we're not sure exactly what that increase will be this coming year, but we can anticipate it to be at least $1 million and potentially more, considering the rate of inflation and some of the national disasters that have happened around our state and the nation. And again, we fully, and Amy asked this question earlier, we anticipate at least having the increased amount of legal fees for this coming year, which was not budgeted in the 24-25. And so that will be an increase from approximately $350,000 to about $800,000 this year that we would like for you to take in consideration during that discussion as well. Also, Ann, you talked a little bit about anticipated costs for personnel.
For Mary Britton.
And Mary Britton, yes.
Okay. Let me grab my notes. So the increased staffing estimate for Mary E. Britton Middle School for next year, we're estimating 63.7 positions. That includes a lot of the positions that Dr. Barber just mentioned, including 30 teachers, and this is based on the current projected staffing sheet, 1 principal, 2 assistant principals, and several other supports, including 6.5 custodians because of the square footage by policy. So roughly $4.2 million is the estimated staffing cost for Mary E. Britton. For the Hill, like Dr. Liggins mentioned, there's a minimized impact because we're transitioning 2 buildings into 1. So this is the total amount for what it costs for the building. This is not in addition to. There are some additional costs, and those are currently being estimated depending on what policy, because the board will review the Hill staffing policy as part of the overall policies in June, which will inform the budget. So we'll make those estimations during the tentative season. But the total cost of staffing just at the Hill is roughly estimated to be $2.6 million. So that does not include supplemental duty that we provide to those locations in alignment with our other locations. So the Mary E. Britton Middle School will receive roughly $43,000 for their academic supplemental duty and roughly $49,000 for their athletic supplemental duty. For the Hill, we're estimating about $38,000 for their academic supplemental duty. The overall cost of staffing for the district as a whole for next year is roughly $593 million. And that average increase each year is about $5.8 million. That's just based on our forward outlook for the next 5 years, and that does not include anything but a step increase.
If we're looking at, I know that we had mentioned in the, and I'm sorry, were you going to say something? Okay, I saw you reaching, I wasn't sure. You had mentioned earlier about, one of the initiatives that was very important to us over the past couple of years is maintaining that position as the, highest paid starting salary in the state. So that's something that I think that, have we looked at the numbers on being able to maintain, because I know there are some districts that are getting close to us, of being able to maintain those investments in our staff.
I think that's going to be up to the board, trying to evaluate the cost of those increases over the year, because with those incremental, step increases, then personnel is more and more expensive each year. So I think it'll be up to the board to look at the district as a whole to make that determination and what that looks like for the future of maintaining that level.
Could you give the number per percentage raise?
Roughly about $4.5 million, and that's across all funds. For the general fund alone, it's estimated to be about $4 million.
Approximately $4 million per percentage.
Per percentage, yes. And we are receiving some cost savings through the CERS decrease. It's roughly 1.09% is what's been published for next year. So we will realize some savings, anywhere from $750,000 to potentially $800,000. But if an increase was given, but the board would have to make some decisions about how other things are funded in order to support that. On top of that would be very challenging. It would reduce the amount of CERS savings, because the higher the salary, the more you have to pay into retirement.
Mm-hmm. And that $4 million for 1%, that includes certified and classified, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, board members?
I have.
Board Member Mundy.
Thank you. What does, or how do the salaries look like for our classified workers, and kind of trying to keep up with that need? Because it's great to have and make sure that our teachers are paid what they deserve, but we also need those para-educators and other individuals to support our campuses.
If I'll go first, I think the first investment we made, was it 22? Was a major, in fact, we forego raises for certified staff, for classified staff, and minimum wage was actually $7.25 minimum wage in the district, correct? Before that time, I think that was the lowest salary we offered.
There was, and to that point, nationally, we were trying to get above what the federal government was going to eventually mandate, or what we proposed that they would eventually mandate at a minimum of $15 an hour. So the very bottom, zero experience, grade 1 for the district right now on the salary schedule is $17.49 per hour. So.
And so that was a significant multi-million-dollar investment into our classified staff. I will tell you, and I'm the first to say, I don't think our teachers are classified make nearly enough money, but it's still, we have to be able to afford it as well. And we are very competitive in that area. And so I often will hear, because I understand, I grew up with a single mom that was a custodian and a bus driver, so I get trying to make ends meet. And so I hear it all the time that we need more money, and the board really has invested that into it. And as much as we can continue to do that, great, but there's just not the amount of raise that was given at that time. There's not, and in fact, at that time, it was brought up to market value for all of those positions as well. And so it is, and I mean, obviously, this is your budget. You can decide what you want to do away with in order if you want that to happen, but our recommendation was certainly not to put that huge burden on the budget again as we did back then, especially considering how close it has been in past proximity to current date, and I don't think, I mean, it's really, it's been enough time to say that it's completely out of, we're no longer in compliance with market value, because it was 2-3 years ago.
And to that point, I think we have conversations across our different departments, including like food service. You know, we hear a lot that they could go work in different places for a much higher rate. So we are competitive, but I do think it's important. There's a sustainability component to the decision-making process. So there's, you know, we're still the highest in the state, but in order to maintain that, again, we'll have to look inward.
Unfortunately, we're no longer, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, but we're no longer the only gig in town, if you will. Before, we were competing with other school districts. Now we're competing with all industries. And so, but we're also a non-for-profit, whereas other entities may be able to offer a bit more because they're taking in revenue outside of placing the burden solely on taxpayers.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and thank you for that, the point about even before we began the comprehensive salary study for certified, we started with our classified folks, and then the initiative we just did earlier this year, was that this year or this fall, on the bus drivers, right? Extending their hours, right? So doing what we can to acknowledge that, because everyone, one thing that this board is united in is the understanding, we've all shared it, we've all reflected it, that everyone who interacts with and supports our kids is an educator. From the bus driver, who's the first face they see in the morning, to the food service worker they interact with at a meal or at breakfast or lunch or wherever. It's also important to know in the context of this conversation is that some of those critical workers, paraeducators and instructional aides, food service, a lot of that funding is supported by federal dollars, right? We have federal dollars that help support our food service proprietary accounts. We have Title I funding that helps support those instructional aides. And those are things that have been a topic of conversation in Washington. And so we would encourage anyone who shares the concerns that we have about what's at risk to engage with your lawmakers at the federal level, because there are some decisions that are beyond our control and some very difficult positions that we're going to be put in if the lawmakers in Washington don't carry the water that they promised to carry thus far on this topic.
And to that point, special education alone is comprised of about $11 million. So that's significant impact. And the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy had published an article that said that the state as a whole receives roughly $1 billion just for educational funding alone. So if you consider the state surplus looks like and the needs across the district, the federal funding is a real concern.
Well, and Dr. Liggins mentioned the recruitment or the retention of educators. We have Title II dollars that help us fund professional learning, that helps us retain those teachers, right? Title II funding, federal dollars that are at risk in the midst of some of these conversations. Title III funding, we've seen improvements in our English language learners. Again, we're talking about people, right? When we talk about federal dollars, if you look at the budget, many of those dollars go towards hiring people and paying salaries, and that's what's at risk. So that's not a part of the conversation that can be ignored when we're talking about this topic.
To your point, Chair Murphy, I applaud the board because our minimum starting salary is the highest, but also our district average salary is increasing over the course of several years from previous. So we went from $66,000 to next year being $72,000. So being the highest above the state average of $56,000, I mean, I applaud the board for their efforts in that increasing retention and recruitment.
Thank you.
Well, since we're on the topic of federal funding, I think, and state grants, we certainly should, Rodney, if you don't mind speaking to that. I do think that is the elephant in the room as we discuss this entire budget, with the fact that that is really an uncertainty for us at this point. And as we are working to develop a budget with a lot of unknown information, there's always some sense of unknown, especially when the legislature's in session, especially during a budget year. This happens to not be one, but we still get those unfunded mandates. But when we have such a huge amount of dollars that impact such a huge portion of our district that we're not sure if they will come in or not, And we have people on the books that are employed with us, have been gainfully employed for years based off of these dollars. It puts every department in a kind of a wait and see situation or plan, and and have a plan B, C, and D there to see how we can do this. But Rodney, if you can talk a little bit more specifically, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I'm going to take this from a two-pronged approach. First, let's start with the state level. Recently, as he showed some articles related to SEEK and funding related to that, those type of uncertainties we face all the time, not knowing how that's going to fall out. And when it was fortunate that the governor came out and fully funded it, but if that did not happen, what does that leave us? How do we deal with that? The impact on us is, of course, smaller than other areas. It's a large dollar amount, but it still impacts us. Also, if you go to the federal level, the uncertainty there makes it exponentially worse. While we continue to watch the legislation, how it all falls out, and related to executive orders and proposals, this can kick in so many different ways and affect how we fund stuff. When I present to you the interest rates, for example, in revenue, we don't have cash coming in, we can't get interest in the bank. And how do we fund positions? How do we do that? So understand the uncertainty that we're facing at the state level and more specifically at the federal level, especially after the ESSER funding cliff, it can have dramatic effects. And we have to be conservative and very thought process thinking about where we go from there. Just so you know, some actions that we're taking to try to deal with this. In the grants world, there's a thing called period of availability. That's the term that the grant exists. So most grants are anywhere from 12 months to 15 months or 27 months, which is 2 years and 3 months. Those are the time frames you can spend money. There's a lot of fear going on throughout the nation about should I spend this money or not, because I'm not going to be able to get this money back if they cut it off. Well, the other side of that is if we don't spend it, that period of availability goes away, then you lost those funds. If you have POs out there, you committed to vendors and you don't pay it, then a district can be put on credit hold. And we have a very good credit rating. We want to keep those. So not paying bills is not an option for us either. We are strongly advising, or let me say we, I'm saying Rodney is strongly advising staff that we take the approach that when it comes to grants, we do not do grants or that suggest that we add staff to it, our district, because you get into tenure and other things that can happen when you put staff on there. I'm also recommending that we draw down funds on a more frequent basis. So instead of doing once a month or once a quarter, we'll start to draw down funds every 2 weeks for the federal grants to make sure we stay ahead of the curve. We're looking at every purchase that is made with grants. We don't want things that we purchase to be where there can be a long wait period to get it, because if it's on back order and never comes in, and then something drastic happens, then we don't want to be on the hook to have to pay for things. So these are things we're trying to proactively address and look forward to doing. Me and my team working with Dr. Barber and Budget and Financial Planning Office, and also the Grant Planning Office, working with budget managers to think differently about how we approach this, because we are in uncertain times right now related to federal grants.
Board Member Green.
Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate you sharing all of your proactive approaches, even about spending it at a faster rate so that we know that the money is coming in and being utilized directly for those students at that time. So just thank you for sharing, all of those different things, because I don't think those are topics that people understand, that where we have a little bit of control, where you're being proactive to be able to ensure that those funds can get to the students as quickly as possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Murphy.
Board Member Mundy.
For any of the grants that have been accepted, but maybe the work hasn't taken off yet, I guess my question is, do we have any or anticipated or thoughts of what might impact next year's budget for those types of initiatives?
Well, I've been working with the director of programming to get her thoughts, and she's been in communication. She actually attended training last week. And I hope to get some more insight next week at a training I'm going to be attending, also what's happening at the national level, to get some advice about how we address these things. Again, it's so uncertain. I'm certified in grants management. I understand the rules and regulations related to it, but if it happens at the very top level federally, it can change everything at the drop of a dime. And we got to be able to pause and pivot to address those situations.
Anything else? And just to reiterate, you know, there's a lot out there, right? We know that. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know. But my understanding is that Fayette County Public Schools has not been affected by any funding freeze at the federal level. Is that correct?
No,
Currently.
we have not. I mean, when there was one executive order that came out overnight at one point that we had to look and say, well, how does this affect and what potentially it could affect? We have analyzed that and see what they have, and then they took the freeze off. And so at that point we started planning, and I gave you the our plan internally, how we stay ahead of the game as far as addressing this a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you. And again, I just want to reiterate, as we are dealing with obviously uncharted waters, we're dealing with a lot of headwinds, and this is where I say all the time from this dais that it takes a village. You know, we can't, this is not work we can do alone, and we need a community, just as our community is behind our public schools, and we know that, we need our community to stand up and make it clear to folks making these decisions outside of this room and beyond our control, to folks making these decisions of the impact that these decisions have on the ground in the lives of our children. These are real experiences we're talking about. We're not talking about dollars. We're not talking about concrete or marble buildings in Washington. We're not talking about bureaucrats. We're talking about a reading interventionist working with a child every day. We're talking about a child going through the breakfast line at school. We're talking about a teacher having an important training on working with English language learners, right? We're talking about teachers working with students with severe disabilities to help them keep pace with their peers. It's people, right? And there's no way in the world that any school district, especially a district our size, could do that work without these dollars. They're indispensable. So we need our community to engage with elected officials and make their voices heard.
And Chair Murphy, I might add, you brought up something that clicked in my head when you said that, talking about feeding students. I know y'all see it annually, but y'all see it once a year. We talk about the federal audit. Our annual audit. And when we talk about food service, which is an enterprise fund, when kids pay for, or parents pay for meals for their kids, that is just a very small part of the money that we get related to funding food service. The reimbursement portion that we get from the federal government for the kids that are counted is very important to do that. So food services is a grant. Let's be clear about that. It's not related to paying whatever the amount is per meal for kids every day. That's not taking care of it. If you look at the math on it, it shows you we're in a negative until we get that reimbursement. And that reimbursement is what puts us back positive related to that. So it can impact us in several different ways.
Thank you. Thank you. And if we're in a position to force to shore up, you know, that enterprise fund, right, then that's dollars that are taken from somewhere else, right? It's a zero-sum game. Yeah. So, thank you.
That actually brings us to our next point. That's quite appropriate timing. As you know, we do have that separate enterprise and a separate budget, if you will. And so I'd like Myron to really talk a little bit about our nutrition, child nutrition budget, our CEP campuses, and their current state and their future state as well.
Thank you, Dr. Liggins. That was very timely for us. Child nutrition is a very important program, as you folks have acknowledged over time and have supported tremendously. We do have 67 meal sites, with 58 of those currently being CEP, non-CEP, meaning that the 58 CEP sites mean all children eat for free. It's a $33.7 million budget, 448 staff that we serve 14,908 breakfasts and 27,727 lunches every day. We are the largest restaurant enterprise in the community, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate that, and we even do 850 dinners a day. So,
and our backpack program on the weekend, yeah.
Certainly. So again, we appreciate the board's support and appreciate this discussion in particular in terms of all the things that you folks have to consider in terms of being fiscally prudent and making sure that things are sustainable over time. This particular operation is a proprietary fund, Fund 51, which we will discuss here in a second, but this gets to the point of being organizationally efficient and effective in terms of operating this particular program. As outlined in board policy, which is your responsibility,
that the board shall provide a school nutrition program in compliance with all the regulations, both state and federal, and it is the intent of the board for this program to be self-supporting. So we are one of the few proprietary funds that does bring in outside revenue. While it is largely grant funded, we do have to operate this as a business enterprise. And there's a separate fund that those funds are accounted for, which is Fund 51, that Rodney helps us manage and account for. Speaking to the community eligibility provision that I mentioned before, this really upticked after COVID, where all districts across the country were eating for free when we were getting back into school. But what I want to point out is the highlighted language in terms of schools that adopt a CEP. It's based on a formula that responds to what's called direct certification, where individuals that subscribe to certain programs such as SNAP, temporary assistance, et cetera, if the school hits a certain percentage, which is currently 40, they're eligible for CEP. And as indicated, we currently have 58 sites. Currently, the schools that are listed there are pretty much not going to be at that threshold going forward. And many of those, 6 of which were added this current year. So we were excited to add them to the program. But if we continue to go forward with these schools not being eligible, it will be a responsibility of upwards of $3 million, 2.9 there, of the board going forward. So it is a painful thing for us that we want to be able to feed all kids if possible. But unfortunately, going into next year, these schools will not be eligible for CEP. So we want to bring that to the board's attention, again, as the stewards of the tax dollars, to make sure that we don't get ourselves into something that is not sustainable. I did provide a breakdown of the particular schools in terms of when they did come on for CEP. There you can see the start dates, and you can see the thresholds in terms of the schools that did not qualify for direct certification. And we wanted to give you also the information in terms of transparency for each one of those schools in terms of what the federal reimbursement looks like and the general fund reimbursement if those schools were to remain on CEP going into next year. We wanted to also just show that for you on this slide here in terms of what you will be looking at in terms of next year for the CEP program. And also wanted to bring up that it's been a couple of years since we have raised meal prices. We feel we offer the best value in town in terms of looking at what the current rates are. And we would propose that we would have a 50-cent raise or a price increase across the board for these meals as being prudent stewards and trying to keep up with inflation. We know that we're not going to be able to offset all the charges, but at some point we do have to look at increasing rates for those who can pay. And I want to make sure that it is evident that even though the CEP goes away, students who qualify for free and reduced lunch will still get those meals. It's really just families like myself. My daughter currently is a school that gets CEP, and we can afford to pay, and we just need to pay our fair share. And we just ask that for the taxpayers, for those who can, to be able to pay their fair share. But trust, this board has made it abundantly clear, and we as a child nutrition organization will not let children go hungry. So we just want to make sure that that is abundantly clear going forward.
And one thing to emphasize too is that something that has been a practice in our district is that we cover lunch for students who qualify for reduced lunch. We pay the full, we compensate fully for that. So if you qualify for free or reduced, you will eat for free breakfast and lunch.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of, again, I know I keep talking about our friends at the federal level. You know, one of the topics of conversation in Washington is raising that CEP threshold to 60%, which would cause us to see these numbers drop even more. And so that is, again, those decisions matter. They have a real effect. And I know it's easy to feel like they're distant and removed, but we've got to continue engaging. And it's also, we also do not, do we anticipate any, would it be possible to achieve a balance with just a change in adult meal prices rather than, has that been looked at rather than student meal prices, or?
We have not modeled that out completely, but we will be glad to work on that for the board to see what that would look like. But the primary revenue source is the student-based meals.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't think, and we will certainly do the calculations, but I don't think it would be a major impact. Most adults don't eat the school lunch.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay. Thank you.
And so that being said, another thing I would like to state, and of course that recommendation is up to you all to ultimately advise us on how you would like to move forward. So as we continue the dialogue, we would like to get somewhat of a consensus of the board of how you would like that to be done as we work on the tentative budget. And in addition to that, what was not mentioned is the fact that that was just for CEP campuses. Some of the other challenges we have with our child nutrition budget is that you need to consider as well is when families don't pay, we continue to give that full meal to the child. And when that bill is not ultimately paid, that cost too goes into the general budget. This year, I think so far, it's about do we know where it is right now, Ann? For meals, I think it's 34,000 or something. Is it 34,000? Okay, thank you.
It might be around 39 now, but 39,000, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say 40,000. Just it'll eventually get there by the end of the year. But we continue to ask our families to pay it. But if it's not paid, that's a cost that ultimately the general fund has to take on. And so that is something that, as you're making your decisions and advising us, is something we'd also need to note.
As of January 31st, it was 35,000.
It was 35,000. Okay, thank you. And if we could go on to now, Barbara, do you want to talk a little bit about assessments and the challenges that
I just want to say for the outlook for 25, 26, we don't control how the PVA runs building on the assessments. However, if you look at the last 3 years, fiscal years, they've gone up 8.27%, 8.75%, and 4.71%. How this impacts us is that we, as a decision-making body and recommending body for you all as the decision-making body, have to determine what impact that has on property tax, because at the end of the day, we are funded by property tax and average daily attendance. And so what happens is those assessments impact overall, as they go up higher, impacts what happens with the property tax. And so you will have to make some evaluation as to what that looks like and where the decisions for calculations to get certain revenues. And so that'll be up to the board, whether you take on the 4%, the compensating, whatever it may be, that impacts is impacted by assessments.
Chair Murphy.
Board Member Green.
And just to reiterate and remind, when assessments come out, it is assumed that we would take the 4% additional revenue, correct? And that is reflected in our SEEK funding.
That is a decision of the board, but yes.
At the SEEK level, though.
Correct,
yeah.
Correct.
And as we saw last year, and actually we've seen it a couple times in the past few years, is that there are instances when seeking 4% additional revenue actually results in a lower tax rate.
Correct.
Any other questions or inquiries? Do you have a question? Okay. Anything? Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead now. We're going to move into previous board priorities, give you a little update on how those are going. And we'll start with Avid, advancement via individual termination.
Good evening. Thank you for including me tonight to talk about Avid. I will be your expert witness for this particular venture. You just had a very comprehensive presentation on Avid this week, so I certainly will not repeat that same content, but I will draw your attention to perhaps some of the most marketable considerations as you evaluate the merit of refunding Avid for next year. So this is an approximate $500,000 investment, and the purpose of the funding is to go towards our instructors for the Avid programming, as well as professional learning and the resources, materials, and membership that go into being an Avid school and district. So specifically, you recognize that we are targeting 4 schools for pilot implementation of Avid. Those include 2 schools from one feeder pattern and 2 schools from a separate feeder pattern, which include, of course, a middle and high school combination. We have gone through we've experienced a journey in terms of implementing Avid, because as you learned this week, Avid is a system, not just a program. And so by implementing a system into a school or district, it's really important that we merge the fabric of Avid programming into the fabric of the school's improvement priorities that already exist. So we've been very intentional and targeted. The very first year that we implemented as a pilot was last year, and we did so through an Avid elective approach, where we offered elective courses for middle and high school students in Avid at all of our middle and high schools that are involved in the pilot. And then this year, that transformed itself into increasing elective courses, so actually increasing the number of class periods that we offer the Avid elective, and then also implementing school-wide Avid programming. One of the aspects of Avid that you learned about this week was that there are research-based instructional strategies that really incorporate what Avid is and what it offers. So school-wide implementation means that a school concentrates on one of those particular instructional strategies to incorporate implementation and utilization across the whole school. And that's the phase that we're in this year. So consideration of refunding Avid for the next fiscal year would be for us to would be permitting us to continue to implement from a pilot stance, but also to make sure that we could do so with deeper levels of integration across all curricular areas. And that is certainly our goal. As you know, we want our budget to reflect opportunities to promote student success, and Avid's cornerstone vision is truly to make sure that all students can be college and career ready, and that's important for us. We don't want students to only be college ready. We don't want them to be only career ready. We want them to be both, so that the power is in the hands of our children when they leave our school system. And so Avid is one such strategy that we are utilizing to promote that methodology, quite frankly. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have any particular inquiries, I can draw your attention to any of the artifacts that you have in your files.
Any questions, board member? Board member Christian.
Thank you. I'm looking at the investment cost, and this started 23-24. As always, I'm going to ask, what's the time frame on measuring, usually a 3-year minimum, I realize that, but you're looking to add a few more pilots. So my question would be, what are you using to determine that we need to expand? And what are you looking for? How do we really know that this is working if we're going to measure this, say, 2 years from now?
Sure. So I think as we currently are in our pilot implementation, it is difficult to fully articulate the data points that would be necessary to ratify full-scale implementation across the school system. That's why our focus continues to be on these targeted 4 schools that are involved in the pilot. However, there are an array of data points that we are and can use to determine effectiveness. A few of those you received an overview of this week, but they are a little bit surface because we are still at the surface level of implementation. So for example, one of our goals is to increase opportunity and access for all students, middle and high, for advanced coursework and for success in those advanced classes. And we did cite some evidence of that specifically at Bryan Station Middle School, where we were able to audit all 8th grade students that are currently engaged in Avid, and were able to confirm that each one of those students are currently enrolled in a middle school for high school credit class, either in English language arts or in mathematics. One such example from Morton that we cited was that our students that were enrolled in Avid increased or met or exceeded benchmark standards on the MAP assessment in the winter administration. And then finally at the high school level at both Lafayette and Bryan Station High School, we were able to cite some evidence of how all students that are in grades 10 or 11 and currently enrolled in Avid are also simultaneously enrolled and doing well in either their advanced placement AP classes or college dual credit classes. And that was 100% of students were involved in those advanced classes if they were in Avid at those 2 schools. That's like the first response to your inquiry. I think the second response to your inquiry would be, we would want to see a real return on investment in student achievement data as we continue to pilot implement before we would consider scaling Avid programming to other schools across the system. So this proposal to consider refunding Avid for next year is actually still limited to the 4 schools that we've cited in our pilot. It would not be for the intention of adding additional schools at this time. We could manipulate where the programming is being offered, but we certainly are not going to add schools at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm thinking about long-term in terms of the feeder pattern. A few years ago with redistricting, the majority of Morton kids don't go to Lafayette. They go to Henry Clay. So I'm just wondering how accurate a picture we're going to get in a few years.
I can appreciate that observation, and that is one piece of data that we are actually using to inform implementation of our pilot for next year. And so I think in a subsequent Avid update, should there be one per the superintendent, you'll probably receive some additional education on that.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else? Go ahead.
Okay, for the next strategic priority, according to the board's priority for the budget, it's our grow your own. Ms. Booker, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. First, I'll start off by thanking the board and Dr. Liggins for having me this evening. I also want to thank the board for your investments in Grow Your Own over the last couple of years. I hope that what I share with you this evening will make you very proud of that investment. I'll first start off with my colleague and I, Lori Bowen, have sat before the board a couple of times and have given extensive information about Grow Your Own. But just to refresh your memories of a little bit of the background, Grow Your Own is an effort to recruit, develop, and retain employees in Fayette County. We have 4 comprehensive programs within Grow Your Own: Aspiring Leadership, Supportive Mentorship, University Partnership, and Student Apprenticeship. As you can tell, we like the word ship. But under these programs, we have several celebrations to share with you this evening.
Before we go on, Ms. Booker,
Yes.
can I set the stage for, just for the audience at home and in the room that may not fully have a clear understanding of the need for a Grow Your Own program and
Absolutely.
why the board, basically, I mean, education is at a crossroads, if you will, when it comes to individuals pursuing it as a career. It's at an all-time low of students that go to college and choose education as a major. It is also at an all-time low for the first time in history where families and parents are encouraging their children to do something other than education. And so what we've found, and not only here in Fayette County and across the Commonwealth, but what we found nationally is there is an extreme teacher shortage. Everyone is fighting for qualified teachers. Very few teachers, I would say very few, many less teachers than a couple of decades ago go through a traditional education route. There are several alternative routes now as a second career, which we found doesn't necessarily retain educators within this profession. And so one of the things that ultimately the board, when this was taken on as a priority and initiative of yours, is that we wanted to do something internally in order to impact that pipeline from all the way from our classroom all the way up into administration. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Ms.
You
Booker.
stole a little bit of my thunder, but it's all right.
I apologize.
Well, and if I can, I don't want to steal any more of your thunder, but, and I meant to bring this up when we were talking about the support of our classified staff, because some of the Grow Your Own is to help someone who's a paraeducator or instructional assistant to become a certified teacher if that's their interest as well. But I'll hand it over to you.
Absolutely. All of those things. We are very excited that the board believes in this very bold approach to approaching the teacher shortage. And one example of a shortage would be in the area of special education. University of Kentucky, who is one of our close partnerships, being right here in Lexington, let us know just last week that they only had 5 graduates for special education. LBD, and MSD. And none of those 5 graduates plan to remain in Lexington. They will be going back home to their home states or their hometown. And so that just kind of paints the picture of why Grow Your Own is so important, because there's not a lot to recruit from external. We have to recruit from within, and we have to grow our own and build the capacity of our employees right here in Fayette County. So to move on to some of those successes, because of your investment and, of course, our belief in building the capacity of our current employees that will directly and indirectly affect student achievement, we currently have 48% of school administrators who are sitting in those seats now that have been through one of our Grow Your Own or Aspiring Leadership program. They've been through one or more of those. So 48%, 45% of all Aspiring Leadership participants have moved into some sort of leadership position or role here in Fayette County. I'll talk a little bit more about Aspiring Leadership here in just a second, but I do want to share some successes for the other programs, such as supportive mentorship. The great thing about supportive mentorship is that it's a win-win. You're getting support for the mentees and the new employees that are coming in, but you're also building capacity and giving leadership opportunities for our current employees to mentor others. And Dr. Liggins always says, lead from where you are. And so mentorship programs is an opportunity for our employees to lead from where they are. So we are supporting 600 plus mentees in Fayette County through one of the 3 or not one of the 3, but through our 3 main mentorship programs, a new teacher induction plan, a national board certification, and principal mentorship program. Through those programs, 450 plus are employees that are receiving that opportunity to mentor others and to lead from where they are. And this has shown to be a retention effort, whereas 80% of our teachers that were mentored through NTIP last year remained at their same school. And so, as we know, consistency for our students is always a great effort towards student achievement, and so we are showing that through this program. With university partnerships, we have had 247 employees that have participated in our Grow Your Own University partnerships, completing certifications and endorsements. 37 administrators have been able to participate in the Executive Urban Leadership Cohort, and you'll see more about these items here in just a second. Student apprenticeship, which we're really excited that we were able to pilot this year. And in our very first initial year, we've inspired 261 FCPS students to participate in Teach Lex through our Frederick Douglass feeder pattern. 12 FCPS students, juniors and seniors, have been employed through Fayette County as teacher assistants, and so they are actually going to school and getting a paycheck from Fayette County. For the last couple of years, we've talked about Grow Your Own as this very abstract thing. And what we've done here is we've developed leadership pathways to make this very concrete and show exactly how is this a pipeline? How is it a pathway that is growing our people? Through the work with our administrative team, we have started to align our Grow Your Own programs with the Fayette County leadership framework and definition. So what you're going to see here as I go through these quickly, and I will go through quickly because they only gave me 10 and I probably only have 6 left. What you will see here is this, in this interactive tool, is you will see some things outlined or underlined, I should say. You can click on those and learn more about each of these programs that I'm talking about. It will let you know the professional learning topics that are covered. It will let you know the requirements to be able to participate and the breakdown of the costs for these programs. So in the blue, you're going to see positions, and in the green, you're going to see programs that are supporting those positions. When I say we have aligned this with our leadership framework, we have defined what it means to be a leader of self, leader of others, leader of teams, leader of leaders, and leader of organizations. So you will see that right off the bat, when you become a teacher, you are supported through the new teacher induction plan. However, as you grow in Fayette County and become a teacher leader, there are other additional programs that we can support you through our aspiring leadership programs. Instructional coach cohort, assistant principal cohort, student support cohort. I could go on and on there. We also have the opportunity to become a national board certified here in Fayette County. From there, you will see that you can continue on to become an assistant principal or school or district instructional coach, an associate director, and there are other programs there that will align there with the university partnerships, or even deciding as an assistant principal that I am wanting to continue in the pipeline and become a head principal. And then there's the Aspiring Principals program that will support you in that, and the registered apprenticeship as well. I'm going to continue on to the next pathway because the one that I just introduced was the instructional leadership pathway, which is mostly for people who have a teaching certification. But we want to make sure that all employees in Fayette County have an opportunity to grow. So this is the FCPS operational leadership pathway, where we are showing how even in classified roles, you can be a leader of others, a leader of team, a leader of leaders, and so forth. Starting off as operational support, you can choose to be a part of Aspiring Leaders program for our classified, and you will see something a little bit new that we haven't gone over before. Anything that has an asterisk beside it means that it is a new program that we would like to move forward with and provide additional support. So we would like to move our classified Aspiring Leaders program into a cohort 1 and a cohort 2, where with each step within the pipeline, they are getting added support to prepare them for the next role. We would also like to add where we have an executive urban leadership partnership for our classified roles as well, and moving all the way up until they have the ability to be the leader of organization. Last but not least, this is a very exciting pathway here. This is our certified teacher pathway. And this lends right to what Dr. Liggins was saying about the teacher shortage. We have to be able to prepare people from within to become teachers right here in Fayette County. And so there are 3 ways to do that. One is with our FCPS students. We also have paraeducators that we can grow into teachers, and of course, community members. I'll start with community members. They can first become FCPS building substitutes, where we can partner with them, get to know them and their effectiveness, and then maybe take them through one of our university partnerships to become a certified teacher. However, we have paraeducators, very effective paraeducators that need to be identified and grown into certified teachers right here in Fayette County. So we are proposing that we have 2 aspiring teacher programs, one for special education and the other for general education. So looking at those paras that are already working with our LBD and MSD students, and they're already being effective with it, we know that when we identify paraeducators currently, they typically go through an option 6 or option 9 program. Through that program, they are immediately put into the classroom, and so they are juggling being a classroom teacher with also going to school. They typically do not have, well, not typically, they do not have the opportunity to do student teaching or anything that really prepares them for what they're taking on. And so through this Aspiring Teachers program, we want to give them an opportunity that before they go into that option 6 or option 9 program, that we've given them opportunity to shadow in our schools, to learn from our specialists, to learn from our teachers. What does this role really encounter? As an LBD para, it looks very different than it does as an LBD teacher when I have to start writing IEPs and monitoring the data and all doing ARC meetings and all those things. So we would like to prepare them a little bit better and recognize the diversity that we have within that group and start to grow them into our certified teachers. Last but surely not least is our FCPS students. And as I just celebrated with you all, we had 261 that showed interest. These students have worked with Frederick Douglass. They all met at Frederick Douglass here in the winter, and they made lesson plans together. They looked at designed bulletin boards. They did reading buddies. And here coming up in March, they are going to have the opportunity, the middle schoolers and high schoolers are going to come together to actually teach elementary students. And so we are really trying to inspire our students through these programs to become certified teachers. And of course, that is taking students right from FCPS classrooms, growing them, and then bringing them right back to FCPS classrooms. With full transparency, this is the implementation cost for all of this. You will see firsthand that majority of this is currently, of our programs are currently funded through Title II, with general funds being a support for that. You will also see that we use classified PD funds for our classified programs. From when we're looking at the difference between this past year and this year, we are asking for, we're not asking, this is your budget. We're just saying the implementation cost will be an additional $50,000 for the aspiring classified programs that we want to implement, and around about $60,000 additional for the additional certified programs that we would like to implement. This next slide breaks that down just a little bit. You will see that of the 5 new initiatives that we want to implement, 4 of those new initiatives are around growing our classified employees to become teachers or leaders within operation. Any questions?
Any questions, board members? Board member Christian?
First of all, love this.
Thank you.
There's a growing trend and a realization that there are some barriers when it comes to the praxis. Mm-hmm. So is that addressed anywhere? Are there any initiatives? Is there anything embedded in here that can assist them in doing well on the praxis and not having the issues that most people tend to be having?
I think you bring up a very good point. We've had lots of conversation about how to get our classified employees to pass like the para test or the admin assistant test and things of that sort. And so I think you bring up a very valid point that through those aspiring teacher programs that we could also add some support in how to quickly or more efficiently pass that praxis test as well. So noted.
Thank you. Board Member Green.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. Again, I love Grow Your Own. I see this, I wrote down generational impact, because this investment not only changes the lives of our students in putting highly qualified teachers in front of them and educators, but it's a continual, it's a generational investment, and it's a sustainable investment as well, because we need to create an education system that sustains with the highest quality educators surrounding our students. So I think that's important to highlight that this isn't just a singular program, but this is a generational program and investment. So thank you. And I'm excited about digging through all of I love the way you presented this and how, like you said, sometimes it seemed like it was just this big overarching idea, and now you're showing concretely how it makes an impact and how people can grow. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
And I will, out of fear of sounding like a broken record, I think it's important to underscore to people, this is an incredible program, right? It's making a measurable difference in impact, and $1,016,750 of it is funded through Title II,
Yes.
which is at risk.
Yes.
Because the fiscal year 2025 appropriations approved by the House on page 212, anyone can look at it, says, the committee does not provide fiscal year 2025 funding for these formula grants to state this funding has not been shown to improve teacher quality or advance student achievement.
Yeah.
And we heard the opposite of that in this presentation, right? And so that's why, again, we can sit here and have conversations, but there are decision makers outside of this room who have the power to impact this work in real, meaningful ways. And we need our community to understand that, know that impact, and to join us, engage with us to make that known to them. So thank you very much for sharing this work, and we'll continue to advocate and do what we can to support it here locally.
Thank you so much. I would also like to just quickly add, as a reminder, that we did start this school year off with 0 teacher vacancies.
Yes.
So I attribute that to the board investing in, of course, salaries, but also in Grow Your Own so that we have someone to recruit from within and fill our classrooms. So thank you so much.
How many other school districts, just for the record, had all of their teacher vacancies filled in the Commonwealth of Kentucky?
None.
Thank you. All righty, moving on. We're going
I wanted to ask. Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dr. Ford, I want to call you, but I can't see your married name.
It's Booker.
Booker, Dr. Booker. Can you remind me the universities, for the university partnership, all the schools that we are working with, and if we are looking to add any?
Absolutely. Currently, we're working with UK and WKU. We have been looking to add an additional partner with KSU, and we will continue to work, and that would be with our executive urban leadership program. So we will continue to work on that one as well.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like Western is really killing it this weekend. I was in a session, and the Hardin County Schools was talking about their Grow Your Own and how they work with Western, and of course it is a teaching need.
With the partnership of having a third, and a third for tuition, you really just can't beat it. You know, the employee will be paying $3,500 for a certification, whereas somewhere else they may be paying about $18,000. So.
Okay, and I think the gentleman from Hardin County said for teachers in STEM, math and science, that Western was paying half.
Well, we
might
need
want to
look into that.
Ask Western about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Booker. Our next one is Dr. Bradford with dual credit.
So I also have the privilege of representing what I believe to be mutual interests in expanding dual credit. You have a few artifacts that I think you can reference from your files, and probably the project overview that you see shown on the screen is one of your best reference points. The request is for a continued investment in approximately $700,000 in dual credit. And of course, this is really a three-pronged approach. We certainly are investing the majority of these total funds in dual credit reimbursements, actually paying for students in Fayette County Public Schools to take and complete college dual credit courses. But it also goes into supporting two different ventures. Both are very heavily contributed by the leadership of the Office of School Leadership, and specifically our high school office. And really, all of the data points that you see articulated on this investment sheet are really the direct result of a lot of collaboration across our school system, especially cross-departmentally. And so those two ventures are our senior year college and career fair and our freshman career fair and career expo, both of which are really fantastic events that we've had the opportunity to offer for the past couple of years. A few of you actually volunteered, and we've had tremendous successes from all three of these endeavors. So you will recognize in the state of Kentucky, and certainly we appreciate our state for this, but there are college dual credit scholarships available to students. Each student in the Commonwealth has the opportunity to take 2 college dual credit courses that are paid for by the state. Those would have to fall within general education coursework. And then we also have a work-ready scholarship opportunity in the dual credit arena that is offered to students in grades 9 through 12, as opposed to the previous scholarship, which is confined to students in grades 11 and 12. And for the work-ready, that is where we focus on opportunities in the career and technical education arena, so CTE. What we want to make sure that we offer our students is every advantage in matriculating to post-secondary with as much opportunity as possible to complete an advanced degree. A statistic that is often not cited is the rate of 6-year graduation of students who leave high school from our specific school district. So we really focus on graduation rates, and we actually have wonderful statistics for our graduation rates to celebrate. But when we look at students who leave Fayette County Public Schools and go into college, and this is a nationwide consideration, you don't often see the same graduation rate recycled for 6-year graduates. And one of the advantages that Fayette County Public Schools is offering is by giving students more opportunity to complete college dual credit courses, they're able to then enter their post-secondary institution with more coursework under their belt and or associate degrees already in hand, which then allows them to either complete college at pace, on pace, or earlier than will be expected. And thus, hopefully, the return on investment for our community is what we're looking to achieve as a result of this investment in funding. So it's a really great opportunity to give a leg up to our students in Fayette County Public Schools by giving more opportunities for this advanced coursework, which is, of course, further correlated by our superintendent's 3 goals, which is increasing access for all students, but specifically our targeted subgroup populations for advanced opportunities to study, whether that be in advanced placement classes, college to credit, or international baccalaureate, all of which we offer here in Fayette County Public Schools. The Senior College and Career Fair is an endeavor that has really led to significant realization of opportunities for students. We have data that shows that we have seniors that participate in this fair, or they have over the course of the last 2 years, that have earned apprenticeships and internships as a result of the interactions they had in this particular venue. Not to mention, there was a lot of opportunity for students who didn't know how they may access college or post-secondary, that they received information for how to access that at this particular event. One such example of that is being able to really think through FAFSA completion. That is a very complicated task for all families, regardless of your background. And so we actually have built in, under the direction of our Chief School Leadership Officer for high schools, Dr. McMillan, we've actually built in FAFSA support structures into this event so that, again, students have every advantage and it's a meaningful experience when they attend this event. And then, as you know, we continue to increase course offerings at our high schools and high school programs. In fact, we continue to increase programming across our school system. We referenced that actually earlier this evening with the Hill opening this fall. And with that increase in programming and opportunity, we have students able to access more and more varied courses, CTE or otherwise, across our system. Well, our freshmen, our 9th grade students, are targeted for the freshman career fair so that they can really think through what are opportunities that I may want to study. Every ultimate employment opportunity has a pathway by which to get there. And what we want to do is educate our students as early as possible on what is that entry point into that pathway to achieve your ultimate goals. So at this particular freshman experience, the Career Expo, we have an array, over 100 industries represented that target how do I share with the student what this experience looks like as a lifestyle, and then also how can you, regardless of your current state, matriculate to this particular endeavor. And so really equipping them with tools has been such a great outcome. So this expanded dual credit ask is really in reference to these 3 components. Being able to provide additional funding for students to complete more dual credit courses than they would be able to otherwise, to be able to sustain our senior college and career fair, as well as to continue to offer a freshman career expo on an annual basis. And I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rockford. Any questions? Board Member Mundy.
Are there any barriers with transportation for students who may want to create dual credit, but those classes might be at BCTC or another university?
There would be, but fortunately in Fayette County Public Schools, we have been able to really invest in opportunities to eliminate those barriers. And there are a variety of examples, but ones that I'll draw your attention to would be the very intentional use of, at the time, ESSER funding, where we were able to invest in vehicles at our high schools where they do just that. They utilize their school-issued vehicles from the school system to be able to transport students to universities or to locations such as Opportunity Middle College, which is under our jurisdiction at BCTC, to be able to complete those classes that are in person. So that is one way by which we've removed those barriers. I think another would be our extended partnerships. As Ms. Booker mentioned, our partnerships with Grow Your Own. We have those same types of partnerships with our dual credit programming. And so being able to offer college dual credit courses in either a full online or a hybrid model is another way that we've eliminated some of those barriers.
I have one more question.
Or Monday.
Does every student in Fayette County have the opportunity to take dual credit courses? Because I've talked to students that are in just about every program, and I feel like many of them have had this opportunity and took advantage of it.
So the answer is certainly yes. If you, of course, some of it will depend on funding, but if you're in grades 9 through 12, you definitely have the opportunity to utilize dual credit as an option for your advanced coursework. And we want students to select courses and classes that make the most sense for their future endeavors. There are some core curricular areas where it is more appropriate for you to take an advanced placement course because that's what you will need in order to be successful for your future plans. But there are a lot of others where college dual credit is a great solution for you to experience what it will be like to be a college student, but under the safeguards of our tutelage here in Fayette County Public Schools, but then also from that cost savings perspective. It is obviously in unison with the board's investment, but quite frankly, college dual credit courses are at a reduced rate for a student or family than they would otherwise, what I will call a traditional college student. So that is another real great opportunity that more students have access to be able to complete college dual credit classes.
Board Member Green.
Chair Murphy, thank you. I think you just brought up a point that I wanted to highlight, that offering the dual credit to our students with the safeguards of the supports of the high school personnel and support system really sets our students up for success, because it teaches them how to be a student before they become that adult, that self-sustaining person that has to be the singular driver of their work. And so as a former faculty member, I saw that when students had the experience with dual credit at the high school level, they were much more successful in handling the adversity of becoming an adult at the same time as being their student in charge of themselves. So I appreciate not only the access to the number of hours for college credit, but for the experience of how to be a successful student as well.
Thank you. Board Member Christian.
Hi, Dr. Bradford. Just a quick question. I'm thinking about the college and career fair. Do we have, my kid's gone, so I'm not sure. What about community sponsorships? And do we have people who assist in that? Because I'm just wondering, cost-wise, if we need the community to understand the importance of this, right? Businesses, Commerce Lex, whoever it is. So do we have partners, and could we expand those partnerships?
Yes and yes. So we certainly do have partners. We have tremendous partners that support the work of both of these events, quite frankly, but especially that senior college and career fair. And those partnerships right now are probably manifesting mostly in participation and also preparation for the event, so we can have personnel on hand, resources there, even examples of artifacts from the lifestyle of those particular ventures. For example, EMT. There are at this event a variety of ambulance trucks there, fire trucks, all of those types of emergency response vehicles are there to inspect, in addition to the certified personnel in those roles, to be able to consult with and ask questions with or to on an ongoing basis. So that has been the predominant partnership that we've asked for to date. Might there be opportunities to expand from a business standpoint? I think certainly. And fortunately, again, under the leadership of our superintendent and the team, we've been able to secure certain persons who will have key roles and responsibilities to ascertain those partnerships. So I think we'll be able to take really good advantage of that in moving forward, especially as we continue to experience hikes in costs, especially for facilities rental. We do want to find ways to offset that, certainly, and that is a great method by which to do that. I'll make one more point of reference because I think it's important. I didn't make reference to this before, but college dual credit is a vital consideration in post-secondary readiness. And currently, in the year 2025, we are still bound by the confines of accountability. And post-secondary readiness is a significant part of the high school level accountability model. And our students completing and being successful in college dual credit courses from both the qualitative angle and the quantitative angle, meaning like math, science versus English language arts, social studies, gives us credit in that domain. So I would claim that your investment is really multifaceted in terms of its benefits.
And I would just, for everyone watching in the audience and at home, accountability applies to our high-stakes accountability where the each school, each district is graded on those different domains and standards. Also, to your point, Bill, about dual credit and their impact, this is also another great return on investment because data looking from 2021, where we had about 3,500 students taking about 8,800 college level courses. Just this past year, we had about 4,200 students taking nearly 12,000 college level courses. And that's really expanding. And with many of our historically underrepresented populations as well are taking much more advantage of these opportunities. And I also appreciate you, Bill, bringing up, because I hear rumblings every now and then about our SUVs and why do we have them. And I appreciate the fact that you brought to everyone's attention that they're utilized for our students. They're utilized to make sure that they're getting every opportunity that they can, as most of our the things that we do here are directly related to how students are going to be impacted. Not most, all things actually. And many are, for example, we have some partners like Toyota has even purchased some of those, and they're not necessarily district funds. But yes, I'm sorry, Chairman. Is there
any further questions or discussion? Thank you. And it can't be, you mentioned this, but I want to emphasize it, of that the cost savings to families, right? Because the expense of these credit hours when you get to college is huge. So that's a huge relief for families even after their students graduate. Many students who go through the dual credit options here in Fayette County, they can start college as a nominal sophomore, right? Or some maybe even junior. So that's an incredible pay it forward.
Yes, and this 700 investment, for example, what we've shown is the amount of credits that our students on average receive should they go to UK. It's about a $19 million savings to our families each year.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to move on now to brief the last previous strategic priority by the board to include it in the budget was the preschool initiative. And really briefly, Myron, could you touch on that?
Appreciate that, Dr. Liggins. And it is a transition of our scholars from each end of the spectrum in terms of getting ready for college to our youngest learners at 3 and 4 years old. The importance of early childhood education cannot be understated in terms of cognitive development, motor skill refinement, social emotional growth, achievement, academic performance, et cetera. And so a few years ago, as Dr. Liggins indicated, the board was very intentional in making investments for preschool. And we've worked very closely with Dr. Stevenson in terms of expanding the program in our existing footprint. Earlier this week, you did hear an update in terms of what's happening at Harrison. At Harrison. And I was going to say Booker T. At Harrison in terms of our expansion there with 3 classrooms, and that is a $5 million investment. Again, appreciate the board taking the third nickel a few years ago and being able to add those 3 classrooms that's going to service 45 scholars there. And we're continuing to look for opportunities to expand that footprint to fulfill the commitment that the board made many years ago in terms of investing in preschool. So again, it's something else that you just have to consider among all of your many priorities that you're juggling. And to Board Chair Murphy's point, again, this is something that the local board is tasked with providing because there is no universal preschool, as you know. So we're just being very intentional in terms of rolling that forward and making sure that we are meeting the board's intent for addressing preschool.
Thank you. Any questions, board members? Board Member Green?
I would just like to highlight the intentional investments that we've had with preschool, specifically the staffing numbers. I know I heard directly from our preschool directors and teachers themselves that it is a huge recruitment piece to know that they can come into Fayette County preschools with the appropriate staffing levels and supports. And so I just wanted to highlight that because I asked if there was a recruitment issue. And they said people are coming to us because they want to come and work in these situations where they can be successful with our students and with the supportive staff. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Thank you.
All righty, thank you all. Some of the things as you are contemplating all of the information that you've received and advising us on how you'd like us to move forward, some of the things that we would like to propose to you and things that we are looking at here at this level to try to possibly offset some of the funds is to currently, this is a holdover of ESSER, where during ESSER we, the board decided to give 2 permanent subs to teachers, to campuses, to each of our campuses. And most things under ESSER has been off-boarded. This particular initiative has not been. And so one way could possibly be to reduce that to 1 permanent sub per campus. Also, we're looking at, in this level, to possibly look at really analyzing every vacant position that happens at the district level to determine whether or not those duties could be absorbed, and possibly through restructuring or taking on other things. One thing we want to make sure that we do not do is the investments that the board has made in ensuring that many of the services that we provide to our staff and our families and campuses, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and resort back to a system where we weren't provided the support that was necessary for the sake of financial savings, but really balancing that quite well. We also have several employees that are on extended contracts, looking at lowering some of those extensions, looking at the duties of some of our instructional staff that work extended days and don't necessarily, but are solely responsible for supporting campuses on a certain calendar, but their work calendar currently works well beyond the calendar of the campus operations itself. Really scrutinizing any vacant position, again, that may come available, as well as minimizing overtime. There has been, we're just really looking at bringing that more in line through a structural analysis and ensuring that we are utilizing overtime and maximizing in person to our regular hours, if you will, but also ensuring that we are not being wasteful when it comes to additional hours that are being spent. If you'd like, we have some specific numbers. Houston, if you'd like to share some of the cost of some of these initiatives that currently cost.
Yes, sir. In regards to the permanent sub, classified sub estimated costs were for fiscal year 26, and this is predicted on current year spend rate, would be around $794,317. A certified sub ranges, because just depending on how many subs there are, of course, that are needed and aren't utilized, that would be around 1.573, so 1.5 million approximately. And so those 2 figures there in terms of permanent subs. Looking a little bit further into if there's any reduction in some of the days, those figures, it's about 272,000, which may not seem like much, but that adds up. And then if you look at the overtime, we did a 5-year analysis on overtime, and what we've discovered is that in 2023, we had $1.86 million in overtime, and in 2024, we had $1.9 million. And so we realized and recognized, even through this analysis, we had to put in measures in place to help reduce that overtime and to permanently come up with strategies to help support. Now, one of the things I will tell you is that one of the largest categories was transportation. So you all made the strategic move to reduce that overtime by maximizing how the hours worked. So kudos to this board on thinking strategically and also allowing us to look through that carefully.
Well, I appreciate that information and that those figures. The one thing I would ask, and you may have already done this, and if you have, please let us know. Making sure, just as we did with the bus drivers, right? And I think we worked successfully with our employees on the ground and engaged with them. So when we're talking about the 219 to 209 and the overtime adjustments, that we're working hand in hand with the employees who might be affected and soliciting their input and, making sure it's not a situation that someone who is on a 219-day contract is depending on that, on being on a 219-day contract, if that makes sense. So having that ongoing collaboration, which we've done with other initiatives, I think that would be important as well. And I'm confident that some of that legwork has already been done.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Board Member Monday.
When thinking about reducing to 1 permanent sub by 2 permanent subs, how is the district handling getting subs right now? Will reducing that number put a strain on our schools to be able to have someone there with the investments that the board has made in things like offering paternal leave and things of that nature?
I think the permanent sub provides permanent structure. And so the difference is when you have, 70 and you multiply that by 2, you've got permanent folks in the building. It doesn't necessarily take away from the supply. It's just how we operate in terms of paying a permanent sub in that building.
Does that answer your question? I think. Yeah. Anything else?
Chairman Murphy.
Green?
I appreciate that you mentioned when you talked about looking at every vacant position that you're going to be dutiful and making sure that we're not going against prior investments and recommendations. For example, recommendations to have a fully supportive HR and technology to support our students and staff and families. So I just wanted to highlight and say thank you. That it sounds like you're being very intentional when you look at those positions.
Thank you. Dr. Liggins.
Okay, thank you. We're going to now move on. If Houston, you want to continue to talk a little bit about some of the other initiatives that the board may want to consider as
absolutely. So up for consideration and for this board to really think through, one, the $250 initiative, that's up to $1 million of cost. And so something to think about as you evaluate what we're going to do or what you would like to do. Additionally, raises. I mean, I know you guys are working and looking through that, so that's a decision based on the board that you all make. Step increase is typical, but beyond that, that's your board decision that you would make. Additionally, just thinking through and just kind of being creative. Medicaid, I understand, can be a top topic at hand. However, this district has been averaging upwards of $2 million, specifically the last 2 years, and that's not including opportunities that exist within our current RFP that's out there. And so that said, fiscal year 25 year to date, we've had a lot more, at about $2,068,482. Last year alone, we were at $2,368,810.46. And so it's on the rise. And I give kudos to Adam Lichty and his team and those and Debbie Bowen and all of those involved with the process of Medicaid billing, because it's not an easy process. And so that is a creative strategy to think about, how do we expand our Medicaid billing? I understand there could be some reduction in this as well. In addition to that, I think something very important is how does the board consider reallocating resources that already exist to match priorities and strategic priorities that exist for the board and current need. In addition to that, it's how do SBDMs function? So for example, in our staffing policy, this is something to recognize. This board has a very robust staffing policy, and you of course provide a lot of services for our kids based on maximum class sizes. And I'll tell you the policy so you can reference it at 02.4331. And we go above and beyond the requirements of the Kentucky state law and KRS, KARs. And so this board should be very proud about the allocations that exist at the local level. In addition to what I'm saying is that we give a lot of discretionary opportunity for our SBDMs to make those decisions, and not just with Section 6 dollars, but how they utilize those positions. If the board wanted to choose a different route, for example, in a smaller district, I've been a superintendent before in a smaller district, our district chose to have a specific foreign language teacher at every school. We didn't have that many schools, but that would take away from the discretion positions, or you'd have to think, because you couldn't really add on unless you were going to pay additional costs and you had additional revenues, you would have to rethink and re-strategize how you would do that. And so, but just thinking through the strategy on reallocation of resources, depending on the priorities and need. And so those are just some of the strategies to think about, and those are short term. And so wanted to provide those from our team and from Dr. Liggins to think about and consider as you evaluate the budget.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. And you can probably predict what I'm going to say. Again, broken record. $880 billion in Medicaid funding is on the line here. Again, that's outside of our control. We can sit here and talk until we're blue in the face, but so much of these resources are beyond our control. So thank you, Dr. Liggins.
Thank you. And I also like to reiterate something. When we talk about SBDMs, there's been some talk by a small portion in the community about really the rights of the SBDMs that have full authority on what are the electives or the special classes that they provide to their students. There's been talk that, well, why does the board just make sure every single campus receives A and B? The fact of the matter is, if every single campus received A and B, that negates the reality that every campus can't even utilize that along with other things that they may already receive in the budget, first and foremost. But in addition to that, what is essentially happening is it's taking the authority away from the SBDM to make those choices. Currently, in our staffing formula and your staffing formula, there's over $30 million in addition to what is required by law that goes directly to our campuses. They have and they have every opportunity, and I quite frankly respect the fact that they have the authority to say we would like to have these as the courses that we're offering when it comes to that. And so I just wanted to put that out there just so there's a very clear understanding.
Yeah, and I think that figure is worth repeating, actually, so people can understand. You have the base allocation for a school, right, based on enrollment, and beyond that, the figure was $30 million, right?
Yes.
So the schools across the district are allocated $30 million additional dollars in discretionary positions. What that means in layman's terms is that a school working through their site-based council can decide how to assign those positions based on the needs of that community, based upon the input from the parent, guardian, and teacher representatives who sit on those councils. So that's in addition to what is required by the state.
Chair Murphy.
Board Member Mundy.
Is it possible to get some input from, say, the teachers for the $250 initiative, up to $250 initiative that we've gotten? And then could we get some feedback from the schools on reducing from 2 to 1 per minute sub?
Absolutely.
I want to clarify, what do you mean by feedback on the 250? What type of feedback?
Like implementation, how was it utilized? Would they like to continue to have it? Did it take off some of the strain of like what they have to use out of pocket? I know it was implemented, but I haven't heard anything about how it's going, so just kind of get a little update.
Well, I can tell you the last two are yes and yes.
Okay.
I can speak to that. We went through 3 phases already that they could apply to get the refund or reimbursement for it. Through the 3 phases, we spent $179,000 in reimbursements. The 4th phase will happen right before PO cutoff in April, and then we'll have the final numbers of what it was, and we can bring the data back to you related to that. As far as, I think one of your questions was it helpful, or that would be on the individual to say if it helped them. I mean, I really couldn't speak to. I would say it would because they applied for it and received it, but the impact it had on them, I don't want to put words in their mouth about what it did for them.
Yeah, and if we do have the opportunity, or if we survey our teachers, I think this would be a good piece to place on that, and even to ask them about even the process for reimbursement. I know I had heard from some teachers that when it first came about that it might be a little cumbersome because it only reimbursed certain times of the year, or so just if there's an opportunity to get some of that feedback and let them share it with us, it'd be good.
And we've been actually, I was dealing with some emails, we was working through this, and one of the emails I'm working with, we're looking at a vendor that's going to help us streamline the form, how we utilize that form to make it a lot easier for everybody as far as tracking and so forth. So we have heard their feedback through Dr. Liggins and Dr. Barber and Dr. Bradford related to making that more efficient and effective. When it came on, we was in, to be honest, in a fire in the house. I was trying to figure out how to get it out the door to make sure we got it done before school started. But we have been constantly working on that and figuring out the good, the bad, and doing the positives and the negatives, how we can improve that process. So it's a continually growing process. I can tell you, as being on CASBO's board across the state, my colleagues have inquired about how we did that and so forth. They've also inquired about how we did the parental leave and so forth. And another email I got earlier about was asking us to sit on a panel to discuss some of the initiatives that we did related to benefits and to help recruit and retain. So we are the flagship in a lot of ways related to those things.
Thank you.
And I would just like to encourage this board, when it comes to initiatives like these, not only are we leading in Kentucky, we're leading nationally, and to be bold and do some of the initiatives that you guys have done really speaks volumes. You will often hear of minority, but a vocal few people say, you know, teachers are having to pay for things out of their pocket. Teachers aren't paid enough. You've done more than any board. I mean, not only are we the highest paid in the state of Kentucky, we're also providing a $250, which matches what you get reimbursed for on your taxes, should you do that, and pay parental leave. And so to suggest that this board or this administration is not prioritizing the needs of our teachers in every way possible and maximizing every dollar to make that happen, I think is just some more nonsense that we often unfortunately hear. Any other questions regarding those things?
Oh, I have another question.
Remember Monday.
Sorry. For overtime, what kinds of activities are we talking about as far as overtime is concerned?
Dr. Barber will give you some insight from over across the district, but I can tell you in my area, one of the things that happens is related to, is being very transparent, open records requests, things like that we have to pull outside of regular time frames. When you deal in payroll and benefits areas, it's like payroll ends, you don't get a break, it starts again immediately. So you have to adjust and deal with them situations, pull information, you have to pull staff to do so and operate within that. We have started thinking more strategically how to address that since the new directive has came down. But that's what happens in financial account benefit services, that paying people is the most important, not one of the most important things, educating the kids is the most important, but making sure people who are compensated get their checks on time, their benefits on time, and addressing that. So a lot of times I ask for forgiveness after the fact had been to deal with it, but it is very important to do that.
We can send you this data, but it has it broken down by category. And again, like I said, the largest category dealing with bus driving, transportation services, ground services, law enforcement, which we know is critical, and those are things that are necessary in most cases. But some of it is like you've got, personnel services, transportation for preschool, bus monitor, custodial operations, warehouse. There are other building operations here, and even local schools who take on certain overtime. So, but I can get a copy of all this for you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Some of all the things we've discussed so far are short-term things that we would like you to consider as we take your directive in creating this budget to bring back to you. But some things that we really want to consider long-term that this board may want to put on the radar for the future is, of course, we talked about the flat enrollment. We talked about the shift in housing and where people are living throughout town. And so, as we've done many times in the past, it may be something to consider in the future, the potential of redistricting and or consolidation for maximum effectiveness of resources. Also, we continue to evaluate our programs on a regular basis to see their effectiveness. That's something certainly may want to consider continuing to do in the long term. And really looking at the staffing formula and seeing is that are we maximizing dollars there and how we can shore up some things there to ensure that we're just being the most effective as we can be. Those are obviously long-term things, nothing that will impact this coming year's budget, but will ultimately impact budgets for years to come that you may want to consider and that we may be having discussions with in the future. So, but at this time, we would really like, if there's any more discussion, Chair Murphy, if you could lead the board through any information we may need in order, considering all of the things that have been discussed thus far, and before bringing back certain proposals to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Superintendent Liggins. And as we shared at the beginning, this is a preliminary conversation. And before we proceed, I do just want to acknowledge the staff who are here, and not just the staff here, but all the work that went on behind the scenes to prepare these thorough reports, answer our questions, and presentations for us. So I think they deserve a hand. We certainly appreciate it. So again, the conversation's organic. If there was anything that, as you sit here, you have a question, and some of you have brought this up throughout the conversation, if you have a question, a need for additional information, something that you want the superintendent and his team to explore a little bit deeper, or anything like that, we can air them in this space, but not only this space. So if there's something you think of outside of this setting, communicate those, use our regular governance communication procedures to communicate those to the superintendent. He will get an answer, and then he will share that and the question with the rest of the board so that we're all on the same page here. But anything that comes to mind as we sit here.
Chair Murphy, I have one. So we talked back when we talked about the safety tax and really how we're meeting those needs, but it's bleeding over into the general fund amount. I think it would be important to see how much is bleeding over, and look at that, and then what it would look like to meet those needs coming into the future as well, to stay on top of those trends and to maintain what we're doing.
We can get you exact figures, but I do know it's quite a bit because Chief Schaefer, how many positions are on general fund for you?
So of our 84, I believe it's 30. I can get you that exact number, but it's 30 some odd positions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Burma Ferguson.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to go back to just the responsibilities of SBDM and what we do keep hearing that the district could fund specifically art, music, foreign language, especially at the elementary level. I know you said the staffing formula is more long-term. I, for one, do think we should review that short-term or long-term, and as Dr. Barber said, maybe be a little more creative with that. But can't the district, if we had all the funds, can't we supply a position to, say, each elementary school outside of the staffing formula? I mean, isn't that what we do with program schools? I mean, special programs? They don't have a staffing formula, do they?
They do have a staffing formula.
Each program school? I mean, that doesn't have like an SPDM?
It's in policy as a staffing guideline. So it's not the staffing policy as you see in the 024331. It's also listed as part of the procedure. So it is part of the policy, but it's something that you all approve. So.
I'm sorry, what's part of the policy? The staffing at programs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, don't we have elementary schools that follow the staffing formula, the regular staffing formula, and still have added positions? Like, didn't we add positions at William Wells Brown?
There's been some, when we had Section 7 applications, there's a process, and certain positions are above and beyond, but that's above and beyond the staffing formula.
Well, I mean, and that's what I'm asking about. That's possible, right? To go above and
Anything's
beyond.
possible. I'm just saying, like, the reallocation of resources would have to be considered.
Right, I understand that, but that's what I'm saying. But it is possible to reallocate those resources if we wanted to put an art teacher at every elementary
Yeah, I mean,
school.
the board could direct every school gets an art teacher, but that means that we'd have to look at taking away discretionary positions across the district.
And it could also mean an SBDM having a choice of a less class because something that they won't fit into their schedule.
Well, that's what I'm not understanding, why it would make them have to choose. I guess if it was outside of the staffing formula, why do they have to choose?
They'd have to choose because of the way the formula the way the schedule works at the elementary level. If you have enough classes to have 3 rotations and I give you 4 rotations, you can't make that work in an elementary schedule with a certain amount of students. And so you'd have to figure out, well, we wanted music, dance, and STEM. And now we have to include art, so we have to take away one of those.
So it's a scheduling issue and not a funding or staffing formula issue.
It is both because it costs money to do that, but it also
I'm not denying it. It costs money.
It removes the authority of the SBDM to make the decision on the ones that fit within their schedule.
Just so that you have the cost estimate for the question, if you put one person, additional teacher, at a district average at each elementary school, it'd be $2.8 million. So it would be very expensive, and the board would have to make a lot of difficult decisions on shifting resources from other areas to support it. So just from a financial standpoint, I
So
want you all to
did
have
we
that.
give additional positions to William Wells Brown above the staffing formula?
Through a Section 7 process, yes. And I think one thing you need to know is that that's very important, is that if it is about the master schedule and what Dr. Liggins has mentioned, and that is how schools can build their master schedule is built on the SBDM policy. And so therefore that affects and impacts how they staff their schools.
Yes, I've served on it.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
In the Section 7 allocation at William Wells Brown was a response to
CSI.
To the CSI designation, and for the first time, we did not have any schools
Correct.
identified as comprehensive support and improvement.
And some of that
So-
was also through school improvement grant funds.
Yes, yeah, so, and then just as a reminder, when we
Good
talk
thing.
about
I'm
the
not
boards.
criticizing that they got that. That's a good thing, and I'm glad that it worked for them and it succeeded.
I just want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. And just to underscore too, and a point that came up Monday night, is when we talk about the priorities that this board has made and the investments this board has made, Dr. Barber, can you remind us the board's commitment to arts education over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the department amount, we've tripled that amount. Now, that would not include the staffing, but it's the amount that we've gotten into the arts, from instruments to support to investing in facilities. And so it's pretty impressive what this board has dedicated their investment into the arts.
And we also recently obtained a $15 million, again, a grant that we're using at Harrison Elementary for a visual performing and digital arts magnet. And again, that's the importance of those grant dollars. And that was a historic allocation of funds and something else that we were intentional about. And that came through the Department of Education. So again, it's once you start, everything is hitched to everything else, right? Once you start getting in this area, then you're getting in other areas. And so that's the challenge of us operating at the level that we're operating in the scope and magnitude of the district is we have priorities that we've got to balance. And we want to do all of these incredible things, but because resources are limited, because time is limited, we have to make choices and maximize those investments in student success. And look at one of the things I appreciate about tonight is the ability to see, and I've used this line before, the proof that's in the pudding, right? That when we've made measurable progress as a consequence of investments, that's what we mean when we talk about strategic investments. We don't just hear about a problem through an email or communication, whatever, and then throw money at it, right? We're strategic in the investments we make because resources ultimately at the end of the day are limited, and then we assess what was the impact of those investments. And I think that we have seen extraordinary impact. And that's something that has to weigh on us as we make decisions moving forward. Because in many, speaking as an educator, oftentimes maintaining is much more difficult than getting the low-hanging fruit, right, and growing. So it's added to that is all of the headwinds coming at us, right? And so it's a complicated dynamic. Additional questions or information? Board Member Mundy.
If I could just ask one clarifying question. So the school board could say, if there was the need, designate money for an arts teacher that SBDMs could have, but make it optional. Not say you have to take this, but if you have need for this, you can have this additional staff line.
Would that would be our discretionary position. So that currently
You could
exists.
change policy and say you either have an arts or a discretionary position, you know.
Okay.
That would be the board decision.
Yeah, but we can go above what's already allocated and say, we're going to give this additional money.
There's a cost to that. Yeah.
Gotcha. I know. But we're saying we can, I just want to make sure that I understand what can happen, like if it needed to, so.
Yes, in fact, that happens in several instances already. That's where the $30 million figure comes from. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Let me kind of reverse the question and say, is there anything that you need from us in next steps for Dr. Liggins, for your team, for your staff while they're here? Anything that can be helpful for us as any particular information you want us to take a closer look at that we heard tonight, any particular feedback that can be helpful as we move forward?
It's a great question, and I appreciate it. I guess I would need to know if there was anything that was mentioned here this evening that the board is completely averse to, so that we can know to stay away from that. We don't want to waste time working on something that we just know the board is not interested in pursuing or changing or looking further into any of these initiatives that we've discussed this evening.
And again, that's not an answer that's needed tonight necessarily, but but that feedback can be provided. Okay. Anything else?
I just have
Board Member Ferguson?
on Dr. Bradford's presentation on dual credit, the investment cost is 700,000. You mentioned 3 different things that would go to. Can you provide a breakdown of
sure.
that? Of
Absolutely, we can
how it
definitely
would
give you
be
those figures.
divided? Thank you.
The vast abundance is around 500,000 for the dual credit, and then
Is
the
for the
remaining
classes.
200 is for the others, but we could definitely give that more specificity.
And then how many more classes that would be, I guess, for that amount?
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Or how many more students could take advantage of that?
Anything else? Okay. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to make the agenda dated February 27th a part of the minutes as if copying the minutes verbatim. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Green. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Mundy. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And then, Dr. Liggins, do you want to share about opportunities, or I can, either one, about opportunities? As we said, this is the beginning, so there will be opportunities. Okay. We are broadcasting this budget workshop, as you all know. But again, the conversation does not end here. We are committed to providing avenues for the community to provide feedback, and that will be launched at the conclusion of this meeting on our website, fcps.net, and other outlets. And again, we welcome that feedback and that engagement. We thank those who attended tonight in person and those who broadcast online. I hope one takeaway from tonight is, number one, I think no matter what, at the end of the day, in Fayette County Public Schools, we have a commitment and a focus on supporting the success of each and every child at every single level, even before they get to into our buildings and after they leave our buildings. We have demonstrated that commitment time and again, and we'll continue to be committed to that. The other takeaway from tonight, I think, should be that public schools don't exist in a vacuum, that we are dealing in a difficult time with pressures far beyond our control, far beyond the control of anyone in this room. And it's important now more than ever for all allies of public education, those who are committed to our public schools, including the people at this dais, the people in this room, to be united. Because there's a whole lot of incoming fire coming at us. And we've got to stick together as we push back against the attacks that are coming our way. Members of the community, we need you to be engaged and involved. You heard tonight the federal dollars that are coming into this district making a difference in the lives of our children each and every day that are far beyond our control or any decision that we have the power to make. So we need your voices. Call your congressman. It's 202-224-3121. That's the Capitol hotline, because we need them to hear your voices. Look, as members of Congress are starting town halls in their communities, we would welcome Congressman Barr if he wants to host a town hall at one of our schools. We can certainly set that up and arrange that so that he can hear from members of our community, and we can work in partnership in this process and see and understand the impact of our public schools, because there's no greater economic benefit to a community than public schools. We all agree on that. And we're going to do everything we can here as a board to protect our public schools and to protect these investments that have made a difference in the lives of the kids, but we can't do it alone. We need our community, we need our legislators in Frankfurt, and we need our members of Congress in Washington, D.C. to have our backs as well. So with that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Actually, Chairman, if you don't mind, Mr. Bruno, can you go over, since we received all the requests today and orally, I'd like to make sure we captured them all.
Okay, yes, absolutely.
Make sure that we have everything that's been requested to continue this discussion.
Absolutely. Our presenters did a really thorough job tonight, so there's not a lot of information to give back, but just let me know if I got everything. Number one was the Lexington birth rate compared to the rest of the state. Number two, what is the cost for upkeep/maintenance annually for our camera system, and what is the cost for data storage for the camera system? Number three, follow up with information on possible changes in grant funding after a training that takes place next week. Number four, what would an increase in adult-only school meals bring in by way of revenue? Number five, send information detailing different examples of overtime costs across the district. Number 6, how much of the general fund is being used to meet the needs of the safety plan? And number 7, breakdown of the dual credit amount by section, i.e. the cost for the classes and the fares, and how many more students are able to benefit from that amount.
Did we miss anything?
Okay.
And we'll compile this on one list. If you all have any other questions or requests after this meeting, just let Dr. Liggins know, and we'll add it to the one document so you have it all in one place.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Mundy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Christian. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all.